Ready?
Everybody love.
Good afternoon, everybody. Let them get settled, Will. Okay, item 1, announcement by Mayor and Chief Exec. There will be a break. Obviously, there's a key discussion item as well at 7. That needs to be done before 7. I'm mindful of that as well. I was going to go with a break at 7 p.m, so I'll just wait and see how we get on with the deputations and everything else, and then hopefully we can take a break. Okay. Announcement by Chief Exec. No. Item 2, apologies for absence. Councillor Sokal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apology from Councillor Gwen Law, Councillor Muskan, Councillor Sarwa, Councillor Matthew McLaughlin, Councillor Nashin Dad, Councillor Webb Kendrick. Thank you.
Richard Smith.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have apologies from Councillor Mel Stephen, Kath Taylor, Bill Armour, and Tim Bamford is stuck somewhere. He may or may not get here. And Lisa Holmes and Michael Watson will be late. So, thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've got apologies from Councillor Kath Pinnock and Councillor Anthony Smith. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more apologies? No? Okay. Item 3, minutes of previous meeting, Council held on 11th of Jan 2023, be approved as a correct record. Is that seconded?
Seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Can we have a show of hands, please? That's carried. Thank you. Item 4, declarations of interest. Members who have any disclosable pecuniary interest which would prevent them from discussing or voting on any item should disclose their interest now. I'm going to just pass it on to our legal person to go through this item for me.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that kind introduction. I'm glad to know it.
I knew you should say that.
Okay, so I'm conscious that there may be a number of declarations, pecuniary and personal, when we get to item 15 on the agenda, the final motion. Given that this agenda is really quite busy today with the number of deputations, the number of questions we've got and the items on the agenda, as well as the key discussion item, I'm suggesting that we do those declarations at that point in the agenda when we get to item 15, given how busy it is. So that's what I'm proposing. Clearly, if anybody's got any other declarations of interest in relation to any of the other issues, please do that now and fill in the form and provide that. But otherwise, we'll take declarations of interest, pecuniary and personal, is what I'm proposing at the time we get to item 15 on the agenda. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Item 5, petitions from members of the council. Is there any petitions from members of the council?
Councillor Ramsey.
Councillor Ramsey.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a petition on behalf of...
Councillor Ramsey, you need to stand up, please. Thank you.
Apologies. I've got a petition on behalf of the residents of Savile Town who are objecting to the installation of the G5 mast that I'll present.
Thank you.
Councillor Lee Richards.
Sorry,
It's not on the list.
It's not on the
It's
list.
not on the list, sorry. Jackie, we were dealing with it as it comes in on here. She needs to press a button. Just wait patiently. We've got somebody with... Yeah.
Where's the
It's
next?
Councillor Lee Richards who's next.
Councillor Lee Richards, you'll have to bear with us, we've got new technology on there as well, so just I'll let you know as well. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two petitions here from residents. One against the development of the Mansion Gardens site. There's over 500 residents have signed that. And the other against the development of the Jack Royd Lane site. Over 245 signatories to that. And we also oppose those, but are much in favour of the development of the land behind Newson Mill, which we have supported for a long time. So I'd like to submit those, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. On the 13th of December, at the full council meeting, last year, I handed in a petition of over 1,600 signatures in support of keeping the collections alive and the Tolson Museum alive. That petition has grown legs and is still alive in the community, and I'm submitting another 251 signatures today in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more petitions from council? No. Thank you. Item 6, deputations, petitions from members of the public. We have 7 deputations this evening. Please, can I invite David Lorry to please come forward and present their deputation. Welcome to the meeting. Please introduce yourself, and then you will have 5 minutes to present your deputation to the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is David Lowry. I'm the Director of the National Private Hire and Taxi Association. My deputation today is on behalf of the taxi and private hire industry within your region, and to support them and to protect them. The biggest issues that we have right now is the safe and suitability guidance that's been adopted by many local authorities around the country. It was first mooted by the Institute of Licensing in 2017-2018. And according to the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976, you have a duty to review your policies as frequently as possible and as frequently as deemed necessary. So, what we're asking for is that you review this guidance, bearing in mind that the guidance itself has been deemed to be draconian by most of the drivers throughout the UK, and so much so that the institutes themselves have recently launched and indeed extended a survey on their own guidance. Many local authorities have taken the sensible approach to not adopt the guidance in full, but in parts, making variations before implementation, and most have made changes to it over the years since the suggestion became live within the Institute of Licensing membership. Now, the reason I emphasise the term guidance is quite deliberate. It has no bearing or power in any legislation. In fact, it has less power and authority than the Government Best Practice Guidance of 2010, which is often dismissed when quoting as being merely guidance and not something we need to follow or adhere to. This being the Government Best Practice Guidance is the government versus merely an association membership within the Institute of Licensing. We have long campaigned for change, and we were very much against many of the component parts of the guidance, specifically the fact that a driver would be instantly banned from holding a licence for a minimum of 5 years, where all other professional drivers are entitled to continue to provide their vital services, even bus drivers, with up to 12 points and quite often more. To bring this into more recent times, Wakefield Council has recently redrafted their entire convictions policy, making it far less draconian and very much welcomed and praised by their local industry providers, your community transport providers. We as the National Private Hire and Taxi Association would like to request that you as a regulatory body, as defined in the Regulators Code 2014, or a local authority as more commonly referred to, address this draconian policy, taking the common sense, practical and reasonable approach that Wakefield Council has made in order to support your service providers. It is vital to make this perfectly clear here. At no point are we suggesting lowering standards, far from it. We are simply recommending and requesting a pragmatic, sensible, practical approach, which is far more supportive of your licence holders without placing any members of the public at risk at all. I'm happy to take questions for clarification or to provide follow-up if required, but the key request here is quite simple. Protect your drivers, protect your licensees, protect your travelling public, including the elderly and the infirm, and the special education needs children that rely so heavily on our service. Review the IOL guidance, work in partnership with us, and more importantly, with your trade. Another issue is your tinted window policy. I've personally written articles in the Private Hire and Taxi Monthly on this. There is no legitimate or legal reason for having a restriction on tinted windows. In fact, by having such a restriction, you are restricting the number of vehicles that are available to be purchased, because all modern vehicles are made with manufactured standard tints as standard. The reasons for that is to improve passengers' comfort, improve passenger safety, lower emissions within the region by reducing the internal temperature of the vehicle, therefore requiring the use of air conditioning far less. We implore you to launch consultation as soon as it's practical. Public safety cannot and must not stop at the travellers. It must extend to and include driver protection, including the protection of the industry and the vital public service that it provides to your community and to yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson to respond, please.
Thank you very much, Mr Lawrie, for your deputation. Really appreciate you joining the meeting to share your concerns with us regarding the fitness and suitability policy on behalf of the National Private Hire and Taxi Association, so thank you. As I'm sure you're aware, the Secretary of State for Transport issues statutory guidance to all local authorities on exercising private hire and hackney carriage functions to protect children and vulnerable individuals from harm. Legislation dictates that this is a statutory obligation for the Council and that in fulfilling our obligation, we must have regard to this guidance, including a policy on assessing a person's previous convictions. The recommended policy on assessing a person's previous convictions, published by the Secretary of State, sets a minimum standard that this and all other local authorities must have regard to, and officers, having considered this recommended policy, found that the Council's current fitness and suitability policy, which came into effect in August 2019, met those minimum standards. Meaning this Council and others in the West Yorkshire authorities were already protecting vulnerable persons and children and the wider public in line with the government's standards. Although this Council's current fitness and suitability policy meets the minimum requirements set out in statutory guidance, it's only right that the policies are kept under a periodic review. With that in mind, reports have been presented to the Licensing and Safety Committee in July and October 2022, outlining concerns with the fitness and suitability policy that have been raised by the trade and ward councillors, and seeking approval to consult on a revised fitness policy that sought to address the concerns that have been raised. Although the consultation did end on the 15th of February this year, I'm happy to accept your comments this evening as a formal response, and I'll ensure that they are included and that the service includes them along with all the other responses in the information that's going to be presented to members of the Licensing and Safety Committee, who are the members that will take a decision on this matter. As an authority, we recognise the importance of learning from national best practice and industry guidance and routinely review our policies in line with best practice whilst fulfilling the statutory obligations placed upon us as a local authority. We remain committed to working with and listening to the industry to ensure that we maintain high standards for Kirklees, which both work for the licence holders and for the public as well. Thank you very much again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending the meeting, Mr. Lawrie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please can I invite Yasser Ahmed to please come forward and present their deputation. Welcome to the meeting. Please introduce yourself and then you have 5 minutes to present your deputation to the council.
Hi, I would like to speak on behalf of the West Yorkshire Taxi Association with regards to the suitability and convictions policy. Yeah, I just wanted to say that this policy was passed in 2019 by all the councils in West Yorkshire. Majority of the unions, including GMB Union, Unite Union, have called this policy draconian. And there's a reason for this. A couple of weeks ago, a driver was banned and he had his conviction overturned by the magistrates in Kirklees. It was a conviction for being dishonest. He had forgot to tell the council about a speeding offence. The magistrates overturned the council's decision and he got his full legal fees back, which was £1,800. Most drivers cannot afford this amount of money, so they don't bother appealing. Before this policy was passed, it went to a licensing committee where elected members made that decision. In-house, it costs nothing to the driver or the council. Now, it goes to one officer. The officer, one person, decides whether that driver is fit and proper. One person makes that decision. One officer. What the officers have done is they've taken the powers away from elected members, and it's become a dictatorship where one officer decides the fate of a taxi driver, his livelihood, his family has to suffer. The DFT guidelines says that it should go to subcommittee, but the council ignores these guidelines. They pick and choose. There's DFT guidelines that says do not impose a vehicle age limit because it would be unaffordable for some people. But the council ignores these guidelines. The DFT and paste whatever the IOL suggested. It was to be debated with the trade and the unions and then passed. What these guys did is they rubber stamped it without reading it. How can it be right that a driver is banned for 7 years for being dishonest when not long ago we had a prime minister which was dishonest? Boris Johnson was dishonest. So why wasn't he banned? If you're going to apply this conviction and suitability policy, then it should apply to everybody across the board. Across the board, you know, every public sector, whether you work in an ambulance service, you're a bus driver, whether you're an elected councillor, why should this policy not apply to you guys? Or even the licensing officers. As for the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, I think Kirklees has just followed Leeds, which is what they do, all the rest of them. Recently, the Leeds licensing officer was sacked. Andrew White was sacked, removed, for being racist. So where does that leave this policy and the other 4 councils which followed Leeds? He's the architect of this policy. So all I would like to do is request the council to scrap this policy, go back to 2019. Why fix something which is not broken? The only thing that's changed from the 2019 policy to this policy is minor convictions, minor offences. A rapist would not have been allowed a badge in 2019, neither is he allowed a badge now. This policy says if a driver has 6 points on his license, this is what the officers told the elected members, that he's a risk to the public. So, for example, if I have 6 points on my license, I would be more likely to rape someone than David that has no points on his license. Does that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense because my points are for driving offences. So this policy was, from the onset, was an attack on working class people, my community. I've not written this, I've just come here because I get really angry when drivers lose their livelihood. I mean, how can you ban a driver for one mistake? He's been a taxi driver 40 years. Would you not look at the past 40 years before you say, no, he's dishonest? What does that even mean, being dishonest? If I picked up a £10 note, that makes me dishonest. Does that mean you're going to ban me for 7 years for being dishonest? There's no clarity. All it does is give the officers more powers. And as an elected member, If I was a councillor, I would be lobbying for this.
Mr. Ahmed, you've run out of time, so can I bring in Councillor Simpson to respond to Mr. Ahmed's deputation, please?
Thank you very much. I'll try. I hope you heard what I said to Mr. Lowry, who deputised before yourself as well. So I'll try not to repeat everything I said there to save you having to hear it again. But thank you very much for your deputation. We do really appreciate it. As with Mr. Lowry, although the consultation is concluded, very happy to make sure that your comments are included as part of the reports that go to licensing committee, who are the decision makers on this issue. I do just want to clarify for you, though, that the policy doesn't say that we'd revoke at the moment under 6 points. 7 points would be a threshold for a review under an officer, but no one has had their licence revoked on that basis at the moment in time. But as I say, absolutely taking your comments on board, and we'll make sure that they're included in the reports, and the decision will then be taken by the licensing committee. But thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for that. Ending the meeting, Mr. Ahmed. Number 3, please can I invite Mr. Bacon to please come forward and present their deputation. Welcome to the meeting, Mr. Bacon. Please introduce yourself, and then you've got 5 minutes to present your deputation to the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Ken Bacon, and I'm a member of the Green Party. I have a particular interest in renewable energy. So I wish to address the council in respect of item 13 on the agenda, which is the motion submitted regarding renewable energy strategy. Firstly, can I commend Councillor Simpson and the Climate Action Team on the Climate Change Action Plan. Having previously been critical of the lack of urgency in addressing this matter, I have now had the opportunity to look at the proposals in greater detail and have concluded it is both strategic and visionary, although a careful eye needs to be kept on keeping to targets. However, I'd like to briefly comment on some of the negative reactions in respect to the recently approved Climate Change Action Plan, specifically in the press. In short, the belief has been expressed that there is very little public engagement with the climate emergency, as demonstrated by the low number of respondents to the Kirklees public consultations. I believe partly this is due to inadequate communication of the consultation process. Furthermore, it appears that some members of the council are less than enthusiastic of the plan. Kirklees residents need to know that the entire council are focused on delivering this plan. It is erroneous to believe that there is disinterest in this issue, as demonstrated by the recent ONS survey in February, where 52% of respondents identify climate change and environment as significant issues. Not surprising, then, that 56% of respondents to the Kirklees consultation were very concerned about climate change. I urge more extensive communication with the public beyond the realms of the council website, using social media and electronic billboards to increase public engagement. I'd like now to address the issue of the renewable energy. There is a motion currently before the council that proposes to use council land for the development of renewable energy. I urge you to support this motion and take action to make this proposal a reality. It is concerning that the council has already delayed the debate on this motion 3 times. This gives weight to sceptics, denying the need to address this important issue. We cannot afford delay any longer. I strongly support this motion, as it will not only help in the fight against climate change, but potentially provide numerous benefits to the community. Clean energy sources, such as wind turbines and solar panels, are proven to have a minimal environmental impact. The council has already shown initiative in progressing the direct energy network and the use of photovoltaic panels on council property. But extending the development of green energy generation on council-owned land has the potential to provide numerous benefits to the community. It will create local jobs, reduce energy costs for residents, and promote economic development. There is now an opportunity to use onshore wind turbines, as the government has pledged to relax restrictions on building onshore wind farms in England. Hot Wind Longley in the Home Valley is an example of how a wind turbine can be operated for the benefit of a local community and provide the investment opportunity for local people. The council should take the initiative to explore such opportunities. Working in conjunction with Longley Farm, a single wind turbine has provided energy for the dairy with obvious environmental benefits, while at the same time providing funds to the Bright Green Community Trust. Since 2017, the fund has awarded over £100,000 in grants, supporting over 40 local green projects. These range from upgrades to insulation or lighting in community buildings to educational programmes delivered in home value schools. Developing green energy on a council-owned land is an essential step towards a sustainable future. By supporting this motion, the Council can demonstrate its commitment to environmental responsibility and make a real difference in the fight against climate change, along with the existing Climate Change Action Plan. In conclusion, I urge you to take immediate action on this motion. We can no longer afford to delay this critical issue. The time for action is now, and we have to take advantage of this opportunity to make a positive impact on our environment and our community. You have the power to make it happen. Please be active and support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Councillor Simpson, to respond, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Clem, for your deputation, for your kind words, and for yourself and your colleagues from Friends of the Earth for meeting with myself and officers very recently. It was a very nice and productive meeting, so I very much appreciated your time. And thank you again for your deputation regarding the Climate Change Action Plan and the motion that's on today's agenda relating to the renewable energy strategy. We recognise that Kirklees residents are right to be understandably concerned with climate change issues and have developed our response in recognition of this. The Council recognises the need to continue to move forward on our pathway to net zero and be climate ready by 2038, and to continue to rise to the challenge and be a leader. The Council's Climate Change Action Plan sets out a list of potential priority actions for carbon reduction and climate resilience that can be taken by the Council, partners and members of the wider community. We will continue to work with key partners both locally and regionally to achieve these aims, including with the Kirklees Climate Commission, West Yorkshire Combined Authority and the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission. The CCAP contains actions outlined within specific action areas that relate to renewable energy, namely E2, investing in renewable and zero carbon energy technologies, and E4, encouraging energy innovation. This section sets out a way to reduce emissions from the energy sector in Kirklees, whilst also increasing resilience as we transition to net zero. In terms of some more specific actions we're taking, we're currently working with colleagues at Solar for Schools and the West Yorkshire Combined Authority in order to identify opportunities for solar PV on school sites. This is intended to help schools reduce their emissions, whilst also going some way to mitigating energy price rises for them as well. We also recognise that renewable electricity alone will not get us all the way to net zero, and that increasing focus on the decarbonisation of heat is also needed so that building heating can move away from a reliance on natural gas. For Huddersfield, our largest town in the borough, we're developing the Huddersfield District Energy Network scheme in order to provide the key town centre sites with very low carbon heat, and Cabinet was very pleased to approve the outline business case for this scheme in September late last year. We've also received funding from the Salix Low Carbon Skills Fund in order to produce heat decarbonisation plans for a number of council sites. These HDPs will be vital in identifying the most effective and cost-effective ways for us to reduce emissions and improve energy efficiency on our sites. They're also expected to put us in good stead for applying for further funding to implement the proposed measures and technologies in due course. Funding is, of course, key to delivering on our shared priorities, and we will continue to seek every opportunity for appropriate funding and finance to help us transition to net zero. Along with Professor Peter Roberts, the chair of the Kirklees Climate Commission, we've this week written to the Prime Minister to again make the case and ask for support, at least in the cost-effective measures that will not only pay for themselves, but will help people across Kirklees in tackling the Conservatives' cost of living crisis. Transparency and reporting of our progress is also really important, as you said, Clem, and the Council has chosen to annually report to the independent CDP scheme and the Global Covenant of Mayors, which are both schemes that align with international best practice. The efforts of our team in this regard have been reflected in our 2022 CDP score, which was released in mid-November, achieving an improvement of a B grade. As I've said before, a low-carbon and resilient future isn't the preserve of the few, but the right of everyone here in Kirklees, and it's our priority as a council to ensure that the actions we suggest are realistic, pragmatic and accessible so that everyone, regardless of their background, can benefit from their outcomes as we deliver a fairer and greener Kirklees. Thank you very much once again, Clem. It's very nice to see you, and I'm sure I'll hear much more from you at the council meetings to come as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending, Mr. Bacon. Please can I invite Itra Ali to please come forward and present their deputation.
Right.
Welcome to the meeting. Please introduce yourself and then you have 5 minutes to present your deputation to the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good evening. My name is Itrat Ali and I'm actually here to support 2 of my neighbours from Murfield, 2 of your council candidates, 2 of your council tenants who are experiencing antisocial behaviour from their neighbours, and as a result of this it's having a huge impact on their quality of life and their health. So without further ado, and in the interest of time, I'll pass on to Susan, who will actually talk through the situation that she's facing.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I am Mrs. Sue Grayson and live at 15 Bankfield Court, Murfield, with my husband Richard. We have lived here for nearly 5 years. There are 16 bungalows and 10 two-storey flats. We live on a ground floor flat. I am here to highlight how the removal of the age restrictions on these properties has greatly affected us in our everyday lives, and we would ask the council to reintroduce the age restriction condition as they were classed as retirement properties. Previous tenants have been a young single mum with a child and boyfriend moving in shortly after taking the tenancy and a dog. The council knew about our problems with a young family living above us over 12 months ago and put a sensitivity order on the flat when it was last vacant. This was disregarded and another young single mum, child, dog, and shortly afterwards the boyfriend moved in, making our problems more than 12 months old. We are both 70 years old. My husband has physical disabilities brought on by injuries sustained whilst in HM forces, and in later years PTSD reared its ugly head. He is at present in regular contact with the combat stress team as he is classed as being vulnerable and at high risk. I have medical problems also, being made worse by the stress and anxiety caused by the tenants, and get depression bouts quite frequently. The tenants causing the antisocial behaviour are not communicating with any authorities who attempt to contact them. We have had the housing officer talk to us on many occasions, antisocial behaviour team giving us advice on how to deal with things. The noise monitoring team have had equipment in 3 times and concludes basically it is their lifestyle which is not compatible with the flats and us as elderly, unwell and very depressed people. And the dog fouling, which has been addressed with the appropriate authority, and action is being taken as they do not clean up after their dog, and the fouling is right under my bedroom window. Nighttime is the worst as the tenants do not adhere to what is normal evening activities. The banging of doors, constantly, shouting, swearing. Our ceiling vibrates with the banging around and my bedroom window rattles every time they open and close their outside door. They are in and out, up and down the stairs at all hours of the night. Sometimes I cannot sleep, even with sleep aids and earplugs, so have to resort to sitting in the kitchen as it is the quietest room in the flat when they are active. They also have put graffiti on the outside brickwork and the path to their flat, leaving household rubbish outside their door, and sometimes, when their waste bin is full, they put rubbish in other tenants' bins. This has been addressed by the council, but the rubbish keeps appearing. The police have been called on several occasions due to outside activities, but we are wary of reporting things, as a party outside last summer resulted in our car tyres being slashed and people congregating right outside my bedroom window, quite intimidating for me. Our local PCSO has tried to communicate with them initially as new tenants, but then lately, due to activities involving activities connected with recreational drugs, which anyone passing the flats can smell. Why has the council let these events and problems go on for so long, with no action being taken to address this and with these tenants? What good has a sensitivity order done for us? No good. Why does the Housing Office and the Choose and Move team not communicate properly when there is a problem like ours? These tenants have breached their tenancy agreement multiple times and make our lives unbearable. Why should I have to put myself through this harrowing experience of standing before you all and briefly explaining our problems when it could have been sorted out? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Councillor Scott, to respond, please.
Hello. Thank you for attending. We normally don't discuss individual cases within the council chamber, but I'm glad you did bring it tonight because it allowed me to highlight some things. And just to put it in certain context, thank you, Miss Halley, for actually coming. But I have been in contact with these tenants as soon as I found out about this. There is currently officers and partners working together because there's an ongoing investigation. So I did receive your email, being forwarded it and gathering information. And just for Chamber to realise, I actually have a meeting with these tenants tomorrow morning. So just so that you're aware. So there is existing tools that I was going to report back to you tomorrow, but I'll still come tomorrow because there was other residents. And that's within the housing allocation policy. So rather than a blanket reconsideration on the ACE designation, there is different approaches. So there is a sensitive letting, which you mentioned, and it's about when a property becomes vacant and where there's a history, and we need to think about the new tenants that do move in and consideration for existing, and we need to look at the lifestyles and their makeup and all their behaviours and the expectations. But sometimes disabilities are hidden that you don't actually know, and unfortunately we can't disclose that information to you. But there's also the local lettings plan, and that's opposed to the sensitive let for an individual. The property, you have evidence that's issued in the area and the local lettings plan that can be put forward for consideration. And this is one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, particularly in that area, because we could be looking at your blocks, a row, or the neighbourhood. And it's about working with your local councillors, getting them involved, and they would be consulted and help compile the evidence for them to revisit this. So currently at the moment, I am hearing what you're saying, and I'm glad you did come tonight, but there's lots of different individual ways that it does take time to compile it. It's an ongoing investigation, and I know you're saying partners aren't doing anything and it doesn't help your situation, but can I assure you we are doing something, and I will be there tomorrow to talk to you, Miss Harrison, and so as well, and all the others that did turn up. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Thank you for attending as well. Thank you. Please can I invite G. Margets to please come forward and present their deputation. Yeah. You might want to get close to the microphone, Jean.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Welcome to the meeting. Introduce yourself and present your deputation to the council, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Where's the timer?
It's on the screen up there. I'll let you know if you
I
want.
see. Yes, I understand. Right, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, hello, I'm Jean Margets, and I'm here today on behalf of the Save Our Combe Valley Pool campaign group. And we had a meeting earlier this week on Monday, and a group of us, sorry, misread that, a group of us at the meeting, and also many local people who have responded online, were very pleased to hear about the planned reopening of the pool. So that's a positive. We also agreed, however, that we should keep our group going because we want to support efforts right across the borough to keep all our pools and recreation facilities open and thriving. Our ongoing concerns include the longer-term viability of CAL, which many of us have scrutinised and noticed precariousness in its finances, and the ongoing costs and carbon emissions of facilities. For example, we've read about Todmorden pool, which has been successful in gaining funding for increasing energy efficiency, insulation, and installing solar panels. During our recent very popular campaigning, we've all had our awareness raised of the importance of the pools and centres to our personal, community and borough-wide health and well-being. Many of the personal stories and contributions that we've heard and you've heard have been heart-wrenching. Here's a few statements from some of the Kirklees documents and plans. So these are from, to start with, from the Kirklees plan for 2021 to 2023. It's a bit of a mishmash. We work with people, we don't do things to them. Our focus is on engaging people, building relationships based on trust, and working with people and communities to solve problems and make the most of opportunities. The sudden announcement of the closures shocked, angered and saddened so many people, and we said last time that we were here at the full council meeting that cooperation with communities, centre users, etc. should have taken place. Back to the plan from a section called Values, which is followed by a list of behaviours, two of which include honesty and communication. And I'm sorry to say that these terms were very heavily questioned after the closures were announced. Moving on to a few extracts from the Kirklees Health and Wellbeing Strategy for 2022. In its introductory paragraph, we've got Ways of Working heading. And once again, we work with communities and individuals and don't do things to them. We recognise that who you are and where you live, work or study impacts on your health, well-being and inequalities. We make the most of the diverse knowledge, experience and skills of our communities and colleagues. And in another section, we will recognise that individuals are experts in their own health and care because you live it every day, and we will work with you rather than do things to you. And then there's a section called Well, where outcomes include, this is a big statement which we all obviously all support. People in Kirklees are as well as possible for as long as possible. And then it also includes one of another priorities, working with CAL to promote physical activity and well-being interventions among communities, and working amongst communities least likely to use existing CAL resources. So we all want to see more working with and less doing things to. Many of us across Kirklees have skills that we would be happy to share, and let's also remind ourselves about the Kirklees Climate Commission with its highly skilled and knowledgeable commissioners. Finally, we also want to know that the Council is working to get proper funding from this Tory government, from Michael Gove's department, from the Treasury and all the others who keep on with the cutting. We want to see and hear positive communication from our councillors about our public services and facilities. Does everybody know what they are? I'm not convinced that nowadays a lot of people really understand what public facilities, what public sector means. They are services for the people and not for profit. We have lost so much and so many. We want to see our services being promoted, being saved and being brought up to date, instead of being washed away on tides of unnecessary and cruel austerity and disregard for us all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jean. Can I ask Councillor Paul Davies to respond, please?
Hey, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Jean. Nice to see you again. Thanks for coming along and spending some time with us again. And I can assure you your voice, not just your voice, but many other voices are being listened to. And over the last few months, we've heard some really powerful testimony from people who value services that CAL provide to them, right across Kirklees, not just in one location. And in a few weeks, this council will be debating a support package for CAL, which I proposed as part of the council's budget at our cabinet meeting yesterday, and which the cabinet supported. That package will provide CAL with options for the future. In the short term, the support package can help Corn Valley reopen the pool, I think, as you know, and it gives some choices about the other two sites, Deaton and Batley. It's important to remember that this is a Kirklees-wide issue. In fact, It's important to remember this is a national issue. In fact, you may well have seen, only I think today I noticed on the BBC website, they were reporting the campaign, national campaign. So this support package comes on top of the 11 million we talked about previously in financial support that we've provided to Carl in the last 4 years. And it will help them to look at the widest possible range of health and fitness services for residents in all parts of Kirklees. But it's also important to talk about the future of Carl, and I think you're pointing that out as many other residents are. It's not just now, it's where we go in. And we have to recognise Carl has some major financial challenges on his hands, despite our proposed support. That isn't simply going to go away. That's why it's so important that users of all the sites take part in the consultation that is running. There's still a few days left to run on that to give their views as to what they want to see from the services. Carl need data from customers about the best ways of making their services more financially sustainable and more relevant, obviously, to communities. And they need to make sure as many people as possible can access the services they need for their physical and mental well-being. We, as a Cabinet, as a Council, as an administration, we work closely with Carl to try to achieve these aims. We have been doing that since the temporary closure, because we know, we understand how much value these services, how much value is put on these services by residents. But there are other things we need to do, and you pointed to some of those. We need to lobby government on energy costs for the leisure centre. That is taking place. The leader, I know, is doing that through the LGA, and we, as an administration, need to continue doing that as well. At the moment, organisations and charities like Carl have been excluded from ongoing support with energy costs. And that's despite their high consumption and the obvious good they do for communities. We have to change that. Pools and leisure centres across the country are facing exactly the same pressures, and the whole industry is in serious risk without action. We are also, in addition to this, the wider context of lobbying on a fair financial deal for Kirklees from the local government settlement. The current funding regime has even been discredited by the current government. They've recognised there is it's not equal. There are issues with councils like ourselves, and there's been issues for some time. Central government funding leaves our residents worse off compared to similar local authorities. Therefore, it severely limits our options of supporting partners like Carl. So there is a much wider context. You're absolutely right. We do need to lobby a government for immediate support, but we also need to lobby government on additional support and fair support for authorities like ourselves. You have my commitment. We'll continue to work hard on all of these issues. And I'd like to thank you again for coming along this evening and explaining so eloquently your position and also the position of other residents in your area. Thank you.
Thank you. Please can I invite Daniel Hood to please come forward and present their deputation. Welcome to the meeting, Daniel.
Thank you.
Please introduce yourself, and then you have 5 minutes to present your deputation to the council. Thank you.
Hi. Good evening, everybody. My name is Daniel Hood, and I am a member of Kirklees Enough is Enough. This group was set up last year to protest the rising cost of living crisis. I myself am a community health and wellbeing worker in Rashwick, and I see the impact of the cost of living crisis every day working as I do in the community, and things are getting worse by the day. We have held 2 very successful protest marches in Huddersfield Town Centre on the 1st of October last year and the 28th of January this year. There are quite a few councillors who came, including Councillor Paul Davis, to our protests, and some of you spoke on the platform, and for that we're very thankful for your support. But things are only going to get worse for the poorest and most vulnerable people in our area, with energy bills set to rise by 40% in April and food inflation running at 17%, So we have been supporting those workers fighting for a living wage, including our teachers and health workers on strike. But we are also supporting the fight to keep our 3 leisure centres open. The impact on community cohesion, physical and emotional well-being and mental health of local citizens cannot be overestimated. The closures have already had a huge impact. We welcome the decision to reopen Colne Valley and therefore struggle to understand why Deaton is only opening on a partial basis with no commitment to keep open Batley. The original decision to close these 3 centres was taken on the basis of rising energy bills, but there isn't a pool at Deaton. Why does it cost less than Colne Valley to open than it would for Batley? The ethnic demographic of Deaton and Batley are also huge factors. We were asked at the last meeting about equality impact assessments for Batley and Deaton. Why have these not been done? What justification is there for the proposals for Batley and Deaton? The Deaton Group is meeting with the head of CAL this evening to clarify opening hours, but the council has given £6 million to CAL to maintain services. What assurances has the council been given about how the money is being spent? It strikes us that the £6 million you have given to CAL comes with no conditions or even assurances about the future of our leisure centre. The council has claimed that it has no say over how CAL is running its own affairs, but you are giving ratepayer money to CAL and surely there should be some insistence that CAL maintains all leisure centres. If you cannot give that assurance, then why are we asking the question, what is CAL for? Surely it would make more sense to bring the whole project back in-house and thus ensure that the public has more leverage over the future of our leisure centres. Could Councillor Davis, or better still, Councillor Pandor, directly answer these questions about bringing all these services back in-house? The decisions to close these centres has directly contributed to the overall living standard crisis in the borough. We hope Kirklees Council can address this whole problem and ensure CAL is forced to keep open all centres, and if not open their books to the council. If you are not satisfied, then they should be brought back under council control. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, to respond, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for coming along, Danielle. And I didn't see you on the march, but I'm glad you noticed that I was there, and well done on organising it. I missed that one, sorry, Councillor McGuinn.
I'm on the leaflet, by the way. I'm very visible.
You're on the leaflet, excellent, good stuff. But seriously, thanks very much for coming this evening. It's very important that we hear voices like yourselves coming along. Already we've had one deputation. The reasons behind CAL's financial difficulties are complex and they're actually long running. And I think you probably understand that. This is not just a blip. There are also issues faced by the leisure industry on a national basis regardless of governance methods. And I said to an earlier deputation, only today the BBC reporting something like, I think it's 200 sports governing bodies campaigning and lobbying government to provide extra funds to support the sector. This is a national issue, it is a Kirklees-wide issue. So CAL, like many other operators, have been wrestling with the impact of the pandemic. And we as a council have done our best to support them, but in addition, they've had the double whammy, obviously the pandemic, and then the energy increases, the energy costs. And those, absolutely, we shouldn't underestimate in any shape or form. We know as residents the impact it's having on us. You can imagine the impact it's having on leisure facilities, particularly swimming pools. CAL, as you know, made a decision to, unfortunately, on a temporary basis, close 3 of the sites. Certainly, from what I understand, they didn't take that decision lightly or easily. And since that decision has been made, we've heard very, very clearly from residents the impact in each of those areas. And also, since that point, we've been working very closely, myself as a portfolio holder, but also council and council officers working very closely with CAL to look at how we can support CAL going forward and provide a package which at least mitigates some of the impacts that they're facing. We all want to see CAL have a sustainable financial future. And that really is my focus and the Cabinet's focus in the coming months. And I have to say, there's been, quite understandably, a number of residents feeling that they've not been represented through the council and then through Carl. That is certainly not the case ongoing. We've worked very closely with them for many years, but even more so now. So all decisions that Carl will make in the future, and it will still be Carl's decisions, will be based on feedback from us as a council and best advice from us as a council as well. So there is a very close partnership at the moment. But there are three things that certainly we need to focus on. And that's firstly, helping Carl engage with customers on the best way to meet the needs of users. So that's the consultation they're going through at the moment, and that's in the three particular areas. And certainly that is bringing back quite some powerful feedback, and I would encourage yourself and other groups to take part in that now as quickly as possible. There's a few days left to go on that. Also, that will help them to look at the best configuration of services within the limited options that they have in front of them. Secondly, again, mentioned this to previous deputation, we need to continue to lobby for a decent energy deal from the government to support not just Carl, but the whole of the leisure industry. That we are doing. The leader is doing that through the LGA, and we certainly as a cabinet will continue to do that. And thirdly, there's the context of where we are as a council in terms of our finances. And we will continue to lobby as a council, as an administration, to make sure there is a fair deal for our residents. The government recognise there is a need for a change in funding to council. They've still not done that. We will continue to fight hard to make sure that's put in place so that we do have fair funding for all residents within Kirklees, and that will give us more options going forward in terms of the services that we can support. I'm sure with support from groups like yourself and individuals like yourself, we can move it forward in terms of providing a good balance of services across Kirklees. However, I can't pretend that Carl and the services that they provide and that we wish them to provide are not under huge pressure. We have a support package that will see them be able to do something certainly for the next financial year. But let's be honest, without government intervention and government support, either in direct grants through to the leisure industry, or extra support to us as a local authority, then 24-25 is going to be an extremely difficult year. But thanks again for coming along. Really appreciate your feedback and welcome any contributions you can make in terms of the consultation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Please can I invite Tanisha Brownwell to please come forward and present their deputation. You might need to get closer to the mic as well, please. Welcome to the meeting. Please introduce yourself, and then you have 5 minutes to present your deputation to the council. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Martin Shelton. I'm here on behalf of the Save the Batley Baths campaign. Since the closure took place, the local community have come together to launch a campaign to reopen this asset. The campaign facilitated a meeting with Cal, ensuring all elected officials in Batley were invited. This included the 6 elected officials we have in Batley. One is the council leader. Out of these 6, only 1 attended. Our local MP, Kim Leadbetter, also facilitated a meeting prior to ours. There was no council representation at this meeting at all. There has clearly been a breakdown in communication between the council and elected officials and local people. We feel this is not good enough and are very disappointed that they choose to decline all invitations to engage with us. Communities like ours have normalised cuts to services and austerity within our towns. We are an area of social deprivation, but still we lose assets and opportunities yearly. We cannot afford to lose any more. Surely our elected officials should be actively listening to our concerns on these issues and voicing them on our behalf, not having us struggle to even get an emailed rejection. Since Batley Baths closed, local people of all ages, races, genders, disabilities and religions have been negatively affected in terms of their mental and physical health. Batley Baths was also a social lifeline to so many lonely people. Assets like Batley Baths bridge some of this gap and help target all of these spiralling social needs. Batley Baths actually is unique amongst the Kirklees area's facilities in being able to provide a fully gender segregated offer of female-only sessions. Women-only sessions are so important in providing a safe environment for victims of physical and sexual assault, as well as meeting some cultural requirements. Batley Baths facilitates up to 60 female-only classes per month. No other CAL centre facilitates anything like this number. Other constituents have also felt the loss of Batley Baths in terms of accessing other facilities. This can be down to the current cost of living crisis, restricting access to and affordability of travel to go further afield. Classes are now oversubscribed. I know that for a fact. I went to one this morning and it's vastly oversubscribed, and you find it really difficult to get in on these lessons. All of these obstacles lead to constituents not accessing the exercise they used to do, leading to a decline in health and well-being, which in turn has the potential to impact on our already beleaguered NHS. Finally, we are gravely concerned about the failure to exercise a proper and timely consultation about the closure. After only 3 campaigns were launched to save the facilities, did a consultation document appear. It was supplied upon request rather than being promoted and proactively issued to the larger service user population. We find this outdated consultation process totally unacceptable and is a blatant disregard shown to the community of our service users. We will not go away quietly. We want open, fully inclusive and transparent consultation. We want Batley Baths back.
1 second.
Yeah, I'm just about to say you've got 5 seconds.
Well, that's all I need is 5 seconds. I were only asked to talk as I was entering, and this is to the Batley councillors. You have an obligation to speak to your constituents. You have failed to do that. No consultation, no communication. You should be you sent an email to the Save Batley Baths campaign, and you said that you will prioritise involvement and conversations with your community. You have failed to do that so far.
Your 5 seconds are over. Thank you.
That's fine.
Can I ask one final question? Sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Davies to respond.
Heckling from the back rows, don't worry. This happens all the time. Thanks very much for coming along. Really appreciate this. And I'm very much appreciate the fact that we're able to hear about your views on what Batley residents and Batley users of the CAL facility feel. We also understand the passion and the emotion that's around this, and we are listening. And I understand from what you say in the upset in terms of some of the issues that you feel with regards to attendance at certain meetings. But we have been listening, that feedback has come through to us, and that has resulted in the consultation process. So we've been working alongside CAL since the announcements of the temporary closures to make sure that that consultation is ongoing and is taking place at this point. There's still a few days, by the way, and I'm sure you know this anyway, in terms of the consultation. I would encourage you to get as much detail as possible into that so that there is a full understanding for Carl, but also for us to be able to understand as a council and administration what your key issues are. Also, no final decisions will be made until that consultation is complete, until that review has been completed as well. Even if Carl are not able to provide the same services at the Batley site as they do now, despite our support package, and you're aware that we've put 6 million in as a support package, even if that is the case, it is absolutely crucial that they listen to your views so that they can shape future services in a way which gives residents continued access to the relevant services. Our support package, unfortunately, can't solve all the complex issues and serious issues that Carl faces. I've said this in previous deputations before you, only the government can do that at this point. We need extra support from government. The whole leisure centre needs that extra support. But at least it does give Carl some options at the moment. And I want to make sure that they have all the information they need to make the right choices for Batley people. If anybody needs help to make their voices heard as part of that consultation, by all means, you can come straight through me, you can go through your ward councillors, or you can go to Carl direct. I'm more than happy to have separate discussions with yourselves as a group. On top of the consultation, I know the council is helping Carl engage with service users directly. So not just through groups, but also identifying the key users and actually talking to some of those. This is really important information that they can take into account when they're forming their plans going forward. So thanks again for coming this evening. And as I said to previous speakers, we'll continue to work hard to do our very best to make sure that Carl provides the best services in a balanced way across Kirklees. But as I'm sure you're aware, this is under significant financial challenges at the moment. So we'll continue to work with yourselves and other residents, as will Carl, going forward. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any public petitions? No? No? Huh? No, I'll call him in a minute. That you've come in for?
It's to do with where I live on the lane. Just a question.
It's a question. Okay, it's a question from, what's your name, sir?
Trevor Smeaton.
Trevor Smeaton, okay. Yeah,
Okay,
question, yeah.
good evening, everybody. My name's Trevor Smeaton, and I live in Emily on a lane called Stringer House Lane, where I've lived for 27 years. My question tonight is directed, I understand, towards Naveed Mather regarding this. You'll be probably surprised to hear that this lane has not had any maintenance for 2 years when we get to June this year. The previous incumbent at the council who helped with the maintenance actually rang me just before he retired to thank me for his help in terms of looking after the lane and helping the council in doing that. But since that time, since he's retired, we can't get any response or any help whatsoever. All we get is a message from the council saying that the lane is maintained under the ancient highways, which it is, but it's the responsibility of the council. And although it's maintained under the ancient highways, it requires some maintenance. So down our lane we have old people, people trying to get to the hospital for appointments. My daughter drops her children off in the morning so that we can look after them whilst to enable her to go to work early on. But you can imagine the state of the lane with potholes and things that has had no maintenance for nearly 2 years is a disgrace. The reason I've come tonight because I don't know what else we can do to try and get some help in this regard. A few years ago, the reason it's got worse, the council allowed a local farmer to build some cow barns at the end of the lane, which is serviced from a remote farm, which we have no problem with. But at that time, extra maintenance was supposedly to be put in by the council to actually just come along and help and fill these potholes.
Mr. Smeaton, have you got a question?
Yeah, so the question is, how do we actually, Mr. Mayor, how we actually get some maintenance, or how somebody can come back and fill the potholes as they always have done?
Thank you. Councillor Mothers, would you like to respond, please?
That this road is only maintained in character. It is not a regular road. Hence, over the 2 years, you've had no maintenance. But we can talk more. All I can say is we're in a very, very difficult position. We have a very large network of roads, and we actually do regular monitoring and of conditions, adopted roads and highways, not in character only. So it would be very rare for us to come out and do that. But if there are potholes, I can definitely look into those, because we regularly, annually, fill about 37,000 potholes. So I can promise you, let's talk some more. If there are potholes, maybe we can do something about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have many, many potholes. We get back the response that you say about it being maintained against
Mr. Smeaton, sorry to interrupt. Is that your supplementary question?
No, there's no others. I just wanted to...
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for attending. Next question from Mr. Lee Riley. Oh, sorry, I do apologise for calling you Mr.
Don't assume gender.
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay? My name is Lee Riley. I am a Kirklees resident and a Unison steward at Kirklees Active Leisure. We now know that the council is planning to pump another £6 million into Cal. Yet despite this, the permanent closure of Batley Baths and Deaton Sports Arena is still on the cards. When will the council take responsibility for these vital public services and bring them back into public ownership?
Councillor Davis, respond, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your question, Lee, and apologies for getting it wrong. It's obviously not Mr. Lee, so for that. But as you may have heard, there's been a number of deputations which I've responded to, so I'll try not to repeat some of that information, but I'll do my best to answer your question. Again, with regards to Cal, this is a very complex situation in terms of the financial difficulties. These have not appeared overnight. They've been long running. Clearly, the pandemic contributed towards those immensely, and obviously the energy increases and the pressures that they're facing now because of that were a double whammy. In terms of the governance model, linking to that, those issues are being faced by the sector in spite of the governance. You know, in some areas they may well be run by councils, others are private, others are arm's length arrangements like we have. And actually the whole of the sector is under exactly the same pressures. Some areas, unfortunately, have not been able to provide support packages like us, others have managed that as well. So many of these particular organisations are really wrestling with the future in terms of what the plan is going forward. So as an administration, we are working very closely now with Cal. Cal fundamentally make the decisions through their board on what actions they take, but we are working alongside them in partnership, and very clearly we are inputting our views as well to help them to make decisions in order to get the best outcomes that we can for Kirklees. In terms of whether that governance changes going forward, and I know Unison's position on this is very clear, I've seen that, and I understand that and respect that position. That really is for discussions going forward into the future. Certainly, I know previously the leaders, when he's been asked that question, has said at this point, no options are taken off the table, but the issue now is not to focus on governance, it's to focus on the support package and to achieve those short-term, certainly the next 12 months, balance of services across Kirklees. There will be continued review throughout that period. We certainly will not be sitting back without that. As you quite rightly say, we've put extra money in very difficult circumstances. I have to say we've put it in. It still has to be passed in the budget, and hopefully our budget will be passed. The Cabinet supported that package only yesterday. But clearly, and I know Unison will support us in this, we have to lobby government for that support for the leisure industry. That is vital, and that's been recognised, as I said earlier, only today. There was something on the BBC website with 200 major sporting organisations lobbying the government and health organisations as well. In addition, we have to fight for fair funding for Kirklees as a local authority to give us that scope going forward as well. So thanks for coming along, giving us your views and feeding into that, in effect, that consultation. I'd certainly encourage any of you members who use the CAL facilities to take part in the consultation as well. Happy if you want to feedback anything to me separately or further discussions, but our clear focus at this moment is doing all we can to support CAL in achieving that balance, that best balance of services going forward, and then continuing discussions to see how we can provide the best services within very challenging financial circumstances in the future. Thanks very much again for coming along.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Lee, do you have a supplementary question?
Just basically on the back of that is, obviously, the council has already put in 11 million, I think, over the last 3-4 years, without any oversight as such. Going forward, whatever money goes in, we would hope that greater oversight would be taken on what those monies are being spent on, so that all the centres can stay open and we don't close any centres.
Councillor Davis.
There has been oversight, so I wouldn't say to be no oversight. Certainly, we have two nominated directors on the board who, although they're not there to represent the council in the sense of they're whipped to go and do as we tell them, they're obviously to take on board the considerations for the whole of Kirklees and to do the best they can within CAL board. Our council officers do work closely with CAL. CAL absolutely make the decisions, but along that way, along the journey, certainly council officers would give feedback and have discussions, and that has been the case in the past. It's true to say, going forward, I would, certainly there is more emphasis on that going forward, so absolutely correct. We've put in a significant sum over the last 4 years. We've managed to find that 6 million now, so I can absolutely assure you there'll be very close working partnership with CAL going forward, and let's hope that in addition to that, we're able to get that extra support from government, which will really be the lifeline for that sector and for CAL within Kirklees. Good, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Do you have any further questions? Okay, thank you. Are there any other public questions? Well, I'm just going to ask. Do you want to state your name, who you are, and who you want to put the question to, please?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Good evening. My name is Ian Firth. I come from Skelmerthorpe, and I'm speaking on behalf of the residents of Busker Lane and also the motorists and the pedestrians who use our roads around there. My neighbours and I have been working with local
It's,
councils.
it is a question you're asking.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I need to do a preamble.
No, I'm just checking. I'm just checking with you.
Right.
Please continue.
I'm allowed to, am I?
You are.
Thank you very much.
Not too much preamble, but yeah.
I'll try and keep it as short as possible.
Please.
My neighbours and I have been working with local councillors to get action of the dangerous corner in Busker Lane. I think this has been brought up at numerous council meetings. We've suggested various possible actions that the highways could take so far. We've heard nothing from them and little hope for an early decision to be made on this long-standing problem. So it's not a recent one. Over the 45 years that we've lived there, we've seen a number of accidents with increasing severity, I might add. Many caused by vehicles trying to take the corner at a higher speed than required, or motorists overtaking when family, friends, or I am entering the drive, or overtaking on the corner, which is absolutely stupid. Obviously critical as they have no view of vehicles approaching from the other direction. During the last 2 years, we've seen many more vehicles jumping onto the pavement, hitting the stone wall, most times completely demolishing it, and of course, once it's done that, then they're in danger of going over the wall, but also there is a drop of 6 feet onto loose stones deposited in the field. I've taken photographs of the various cars that have done this, and I'm sure the local authority has seen this from the Highways Department.
You'll have to get to the questions, sir, because I'm mindful of time, if you don't mind.
You've got to hear what...
No, but you're running out of time. And
well, all right, then
thank
we've
you.
gone to the last accident, then. We'll forget all the others.
Yeah, and if we get to the question, I'd appreciate
It's
that.
not really sensible, but I'll let you take that. The latest accident on the 7th of February, and of course, following that, nothing's been done to repair the wall. So very dangerous for pedestrians if it fell over, as no barriers there. Children, either on their journey to school or return together with other pedestrians, are in danger. Perhaps you can advise me if you have any plans to carry out the works necessary to mitigate the danger to other road users and ensure anyone, including children, can use pavements safely. It's important to note that highways have been warned of the responsibilities to the public on many occasions, and yet no valid proposals.
Councillor Mathers, respond, please.
Thank you for coming today and talking about Busker Lane. I know it quite well because it's mentioned so often, and some questions today actually refer to Busker Lane. And Councillor Simpson and I have, he has been raising this, and we have had discussions, and I can tell you, and I have told a couple of individuals who have written to me before now about Busker Lane. We have got a scheme to address the roads concerns on Busker Lane in the Highways Capital programme for this year. We are currently working towards a concept plan to address road safety issues on the bend that you refer to. The scheme is likely to include measures to highlight the bend to drivers, which will aim to slow them as they approach the bend. We are looking at various options, including vehicle-activated warning signs, new chevron signs, additional warning signs, road studs, and lining, and a potential for some traffic islands too. We are aiming to share the updates and proposals with the local ward councillors, although Councillor Simpson knows already, and then with residents thereafter. If no concerns are raised with the proposed scheme, we anticipate the scheme should be on site and completed by the end of, say, autumn, before autumn this year.
Will that include actually raising the pavement and making it all safer? Because, of course, if you don't do that, then children who are going to school and coming back from school are still going to be they could have accidents.
I am
you know,
sorry.
They don't have control of them.
I am sure all of those considerations will have been taken on by the Highways Safety team in their planning. I can't give you the actual details, but I can give you what we are doing. We will be delivering what residents have asked us to do. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Public question time is now over. If there are any questions, could you send them to writing to the council, and the cabinet member will respond to those questions. Thank you. I'm now moving, mindful of the time as well, so I'm going to key discussion item 12, which is the evening's key discussion will be library service provision in Kirklees Council. We'll receive a presentation from Richard Parry, Strategic Director, Adults and Health, and Councillor Davis introduce the key discussion debate.
Good evening, and thank you. Some of my earliest childhood memories of being stood beneath this very tall counter in the library, cardboard ticket holder in hand, hoping that I'd not lost it along the way and wasn't going to incur the ire of the librarian. And a particular treat was going to be stamping the book with the date, hoping that I then remembered the date and didn't get told off by my parents for risking a library fine. The library that I went to as a child is still there. It's the library that when my parents were in their 80s, they got to grips with the internet through Silver Surfers. It's the library that my father, in his late 80s, with limited hearing and mobility, still gets access to one of the few things that gives him pleasure in life. That library has served that community well. It will, however, have also sparked in me something of becoming a library nerd. When I go on holiday, when I go to other places, I'm always tempted to go and look in the local library. And the reason, of course, for that is that it's one of the very few public service buildings that you can walk into without an appointment, without a reason to be there. And if you go and spend the day there, no one will ask, "Can I help you?" in that tone of voice that really means, "Get out." And I suggest that's why libraries have endured at the heart of our communities. But many people have a story about how libraries have become part of their world. For anyone who has small children, there's that period of time when they are very small, when actually you feel run off your feet looking after them. But at the same time, you can become very isolated. And that's particularly true if you move into a new area where you've not got established networks, where you're trying to get to grips with how does the local system work? How do I plug my children into childcare? How do I access schooling? I've been through that experience. And this is actually how a library helped someone moving into an area with small children. So that set of initials at the very first line is we've been experimenting with unpacking staff from the customer service centres in Dewsbury and Huddersfield and locating them out into libraries to give a much more localised offer. That's the bit about place-based working. We know libraries are invaluable to people in accessing online services. Library membership is something that I think every child should benefit from. I was in our local library at the end of half term. They talked about how they'd crammed almost 50 children in one day to see a film. It's been complete carnage, but there's been an awful lot of fun had. And libraries, of course, are much more than about books, as we'll go on to find out. But they are a place where people become known. And they do a bit more than just offer advice and connect people. We've issued 925,000 items, not just books, but lots of online material. We've had almost 900,000 visits to our 24 libraries. And despite what people have said about libraries, membership is growing. We've had 14,000 more people join us in the last year. And they're all about a lot more, again, than just books. 94,000 people attending events, 28,500 people volunteering their time. And we have a library network that relies on the kind contributions of 400 volunteers. But our library network's different to that in some parts of the country, where councils have taken an approach which is we're going to hand over the library to volunteers, and if it doesn't work out, well, that's kind of tough. Because actually we see volunteers as an integral part of the team. There's 530 people supporting our libraries, all bring a very valuable contribution. And when we calculated the value of the books, the online material that people used, it saved people in Kirklees £10 million last year. And all of this, as I say, from one of the few public spaces you can walk into, and no one will ask why you're there. And we won't fine you either. So those childhood memories I had of being fined are gone in Kirklees. We became the second library authority in the country to stop fining people. Because we knew actually it deterred people. The worry about returning a book late was a deterrent. We don't ask people for ID. We trust people when they join the library. And actually, people don't take our books. And there's an awful lot goes on in our libraries. So this is a board in Mirfield, but you go around any of our 24 libraries and you'll see all sorts of things happening for people of all sorts of ages. Most of them run by volunteers. Often they're just acting, the library's acting as a host building for that activity to take place. But what happens in the libraries reflects the variety of our communities. So we have 24 libraries across Kirklees. The yellow triangles are libraries that we've community asset transferred. So we've gone further than just using volunteers from the local community. We've handed over the building to the local community. And in many cases, there's parts of the week where the building runs entirely through volunteers, not left to their own devices, but feeling part of that library team. And the way each of those has evolved and shaped is driven by knowledge of local communities and what's important to local communities. We're now at a point actually where only 12 of the libraries are things that we'd have thought of as a conventional library, a standalone building owned by the council. They're much more integrated into communities. But they are also part of a much wider network of activity in communities. They're very much linked into the local health service. We have a very trusted collection of books on common mental health issues, on autism, on living with dementia, chosen and curated by librarians with knowledge, but connected into our local healthcare services. It's a place you can go to get a social work assessment. It's a place that offers you early support. It's a place that connects children to activities, from rhyme time to Lego Club to those films. I'll go on later to explain about how we contribute to skills, education and employment. They're very much part of that anchor network within local communities, VCSE organisations. There's a number of our libraries where self-help groups have the keys and they use it as a venue in the evening, because we're not precious about our buildings. And critically, it's a place where you can go for advice and information. And libraries, of course, have evolved over time. I don't know whether anyone recognises themselves in the top left picture. The bottom right picture is the Berkeley Fartown Library with that purposeful, dementia-friendly design. So some of the things you can see there are very careful choices of colours, of contrast, so actually the seats stand out from the carpet, of lots of natural light, of an environment that actually, even when the library is busy, it feels hushed. Not because we're telling people, shh, but actually we manage the acoustics very well, so that people living with dementia, for autistic people, it feels a much more welcoming environment. And libraries have had to continue to evolve. These were all things that were once in libraries. I recognise that some people in this room will know what they all were. For other people, some of these things are ancient relics of the music industry. And many of us will remember a library where there was a big rack of the Encyclopaedia Britannica taking up shelf space. And of course, all of those are gone now. Information is online. But one of the challenges with online information is actually there's too much information. It's very difficult to know what to trust. So this is the national surveys about who the public trust, to tell the truth or not. And I recognise some people may be looking for where local councillors are. You'll see the librarians are second from top. People trust what librarians say. Local councillors, though, you're not second from bottom. You're doing better than professional footballers. But you are towards the bottom. And libraries, of course, are much more than about books, about being a warm space. They add value to community in many different ways. So there's been some national research around social return on investment. Every £1 that's invested into the library services delivers £8 of benefit into a local community. Some of that is as simple as a well-located library, a vibrant library on a high street can increase revenue for local businesses by 10% through the footfall that it drives into that high street and into that community. There's 14 business and intellectual property centres, that's the BIPC, developed by the British Library, and one of the hubs for that is Dewsbury Library. We've just got £125,000 to develop new start-up space for local businesses there. You'll see the extent to which children and young people use our library service. And we were the first library service in Yorkshire and Humber to be recognised as a city of sanctuary or library of sanctuary for the inclusive work we have. It's time for me to stop talking and time for local people to say what the library service means for them. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Richard, for that fantastic introduction to libraries. And it's brought back my childhood memories as well, so pretty much the same as yours. One thing I'll add, I genuinely forgotten about this until you were going through that. I remember what we called the miners' libraries, or some people called them the miners' institutes, and there were libraries in there. And just the difference that made to working people, and how that created aspiration, and through the work as I think it was WEA, wasn't it? I think, if I remember, when many of those individuals went on to study not just part-time, but in full-time education when they were older. So libraries have always had that element, I think, of community engagement. And I'm really proud of the team, yourself and the libraries team, and the connection that you have with our communities right across Kirklees. For me, libraries are at the very heart of what we do, for the reasons that you've already identified. I'm not going to go through those again. But I think that sense of having something within your community that you feel part of and able to access, and to be that inclusivity where everybody is treated as an equal, where there are no barriers, and there certainly should be nobody feeling that they're in the wrong place. We've still work to do, convincing, I think, some people that libraries are their place as well. But the way we organise our service, I believe we're very much going along that route very effectively. But as you just said, enough said from you. I want to listen to residents in the Bubbage put up. I think enough from me now. What I'd really like to hear is from councillors across the chamber, their experience of libraries, and in particular our libraries, not just what they pick up and the feedback, but also if they've got views or comments that we can take on board about the service and how we drive that service going forward. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor John Taylor, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you to Richard for a very, very good presentation. I'm going to start with a confession, and it's your fault, Richard. I'm a library nerd as well. You know, I grew up with libraries. My aunt and uncle were librarians, so I think it's kind of in the genes, it's in the blood. And, you know, as some of my earliest memories of being taken to my local library, a bit like Richard, and I'm still there and I'm still going today. I volunteer in my libraries. I don't get there as often as I used to. I seem to be busier these days, but it's, as you described, it's a fantastic open space. I love the thought about you can go into your library and nobody asks you why you're there. I know in one of the libraries in my patch that I volunteered in, there was a year where we had a young lad that used to come in on a Thursday afternoon in his school uniform, and he'd just sit at the back quietly and do his homework. And I spoke to him one time about, you know, why he came in, and it was, he didn't have anywhere to go. It was while he was waiting for his parents to finish work and pick him up, and his parents knew he'd be safe there. And that's a wonderful service that we offer. I often, when I talk to people about libraries, libraries are important very much at both ends of our lives. And we tend to get a bit busy in the middle, and I'll come back to that. But for young people, for young children, you cannot introduce them to libraries young enough. We all know that early years are so important in terms of a child's development and their future potential as an adult and through their career. So getting a child into a library, getting them to start to understand and feel books, it's dreadful when you work as a volunteer in a library and you need to go and find one of those picture books that somebody wants to borrow, because they're just all in boxes and you're hunting through to find the right one. It's not as easy as the adult ones where you know where to go and look. But those picture books are fabulous. The stories in them are wonderful, and they inspire and enthuse children. And what better way of getting children to start learning, to start understanding, to start playing with words and understand words? There's nothing more important in terms of helping a child development than getting them down to your local library. And then at the other end of the life cycle are much older residents, the ones we worry about that are perhaps more vulnerable, more isolated, more lonely. They can lose themselves in books. There are quite a lot of residents that come into my libraries that I know spend a lot of time reading because they can lose themselves in those stories, and it takes them away from the worries, the concerns, the anxieties, and the loneliness of being alone, that they've lost their partner at some point, their children are busy working or living away or whatever it may be, and books have a huge role to play, and I think we underplay that. People don't quite appreciate how important libraries are. And then, as Richard outlined, there is a huge range of other activities that take place in and around our libraries, and we can only increase that. Community Plus are a wonderful asset that we provide, base themselves in our libraries, and it's much easier for people to come and talk to them, and they'll talk to people in the libraries, because it doesn't feel like you're saying, I need help, I've got to go make an appointment somewhere in a council office. You can wander into your library, they'll be there and they'll chat to you and you can chat to them. If I do have an ask, and Councillor Davis did say, what is the ask? My worry about our libraries is the hours that they're open. And I accept that we can't have them open 24/7, but both the libraries in my patch at the moment are not open after 5 o'clock. They're open for 2 hours on a Saturday morning. Those of you that have children or grandchildren probably know that Saturday morning is when your taxi, you're either parents' taxi or grandparents' taxi. And there is a whole range of activities that are going on. So the actual time when a parent can get their child to a library, or they can get to a library themselves if they work full time, it's just not there. We need to think again about the hours that we use that we have our libraries open, if we want to get everybody having the opportunities that there are in libraries and the access to information, because again, I agree, Richard, that they are a huge source of information for people, whether it's the volunteers and the staff that work in our libraries that know so much about everything that Kirklees does and can signpost people, or whether it's just helping them get online with the computer and helping them with, certainly with some of our older residents who aren't quite the silver surfers your parents might have been, but need that help in terms of finding out how to do things. So much needs to be done online today, and that's help and support is there. But if I've got an ask, we need to think again about how do we make our libraries accessible at all times to everybody, rather than at the moment where you've got that 2-hour window on a Saturday morning, and if you're off to football or dance or whatever else it may be with your children, you lose the opportunity to get into a library. I'll leave it there, but hugely supportive, and thank you, Richard, and pass on my thanks to all the team for all they do.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Richard. Where do I start? Libraries were a sanctuary for me and my 3 sisters and my brother. We were very poor and we didn't have any toys or books. I learnt English at the library and went on to have a very successful academic career. Can you imagine? I learnt English in a library. I felt safe in a library. I could take books home and pretend they were mine. So libraries are so very important. You could say my family became nerds where books were concerned. Physical books are ever so important. And I remember in, I think about 2012, no, earlier, when I worked at Huddersfield University, and we went off Easter where the library was being refurbished. I came back, all the criminology books had gone. I was mortified, and you know what they said? Dinosaur, they're all online now. You can have them anywhere at any time. And I was so very, very sad. So libraries are at the heart of our communities. They do more than just provide books. And I think, you know, it took me back when I see my 16-month-old granddaughter, I'm a younger granddaughter of 2, her head in books. She loves books. So we need our libraries, and I want a big shout out for our librarians, award-winning service, and may they live long to prosper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. Councillor Andrew Pinnock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I suppose I have to declare an interest before I start speaking. But first of all, I would like to thank Richard Parry for what he said. And this is no reflection on the professional library staff that we employ, but to have somebody who makes such an eloquent defence of libraries, as Richard did, is quite comforting to me, a professional librarian. And I do think that we underestimate what libraries can do at our peril. I mean, I spent most of my career working in a commercial and technical library, so I know at first hand the importance of dealing with information as well as books, because obviously during my career most of the stuff was still in books. It hadn't changed to the alternative formats that we have now. But the important thing about libraries has already been mentioned. They're not judging you. You can just walk in and you will have a safe space in which you can study anything you like that's legal, obviously, and so on. But the Kirklees system needs to be able to do all of these things. I'm going to echo to some extent what Councillor Taylor said. We haven't got enough hours. And, you know, when I look particularly at Cleckheaton Library, which in my head would be a full-time library, in other words, ought to be open about 50 hours a week. It's nowhere near that at the moment, and in fact it's closed one whole day. I know people with smaller libraries will think, well, you're dead lucky to have that, but that's not the point. we need to have facilities that are available for as long as possible. And thank you for highlighting the Dewsbury money that is there for helping businesses. That is one of the things that, well, indeed, I spent a lot of my career trying to do, providing information for businesses. And it's really, really important because it helps the economy. And that does require the service to be available for as long as possible during the week. I'm sure other colleagues will labour that point in relation to different libraries. But in terms of the one that is now closest to my heart, Cleckheaton Library, you may remember we had some issues some years ago, and Councillor Turner will probably remember this, coming to Cleckheaton on several occasions to talk to people. We had a petition of 4,000 names to keep the library open. And if you want some sort of definition of what people thought about the place, that's as good as any, it seems to me. And what's now changed since I was working in libraries is the number of volunteers. We had a rather strange relationship with volunteers in those days, but it's not like that at all now. And I have to pay tribute to the volunteers who help run Cleckheaton Library. And every month they have a copy morning, first Saturday of the month. I go as often as I can because they produce the most wonderful cakes. They do really help run the library. So, you know, it's important that we maximise this resource that we've got. And when I say maximise, I mean have it available for as much as possible. Yes, I know you can do some things on the phone and online, but that's not the same as having somebody there to whom you can speak. So, you know, keep it up and expand it, please.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. Councillor Warner.
Hi. Just briefly, I want to give a call for one aspect of the library that's been such a success in Slough. Initiated by one of our great hub officers, Lisa Scully, a couple of years ago. We now have an action-packed day on a Thursday where so many lonely old people come. And it starts with a wellbeing walk. It's unbelievable. You get one woman who comes who's, I mean, you know, she's big. And the first day, she comes back after 10 minutes. I can't walk anymore. And by now, she's going the half-hour walk with all of them. They come back, they have a lunch. We've now got up to 30 coming. And we've gradually had 1 or 2 men pop in. And now about 5 of them. There's so many friendships being built. And then about half of them now, in fact, about 25 at the last one, then come to a chair yoga thing that I run for the food bank. But the whole thing is a real buzz and so many friendships. And we've got a brilliant librarian. And then there's also advice being given. So I just want to give a big plug for how positive that little thing is. It's the highlight of people in the villages week who come. Mostly lonely people living on their own. So brilliant, well done. Hope there's more of those.
Thank you, Councillor Warner. Councillor Scott.
You ready for this? All right, so I'm going to start by saying my favourite book was Stig of the Dump. And it's its 60th anniversary this year, published in 1963 by Clive King. But moving on to talk about libraries, I wouldn't call myself a nerd, but I do like the touch and feel of a book. I think there's something in that, and people should really respect that. So libraries have been the hub of our communities for many years, and we are watching them evolve in front of our eyes, and it's now new and person-centred, And I think that's the most fantastic thing about it. It's like walking into an interchange. It is for me when I go into Dewsbury Library, because you're directed to partners, to groups and different things that you can get involved in. And it's about supporting people and the communities, but it's also about allowing people and volunteers to evolve themselves, that it's accessible. There's no barriers. When you go into a library, you can reach information and there's always somebody there to help you. I'm proud of Kirklees' commitment that we have committed ourselves to the library service where we can. And I'm especially proud of the volunteers that took on asset transfers or are working within the library service to enable that to happen. Libraries for me, and I think for most people here, are a place of refuge. They're a place for social interaction, and they're also a place to access computers when communities or families or individuals can't afford. As I said, it's not just about computers. It's about the feel, touch, smell of a book. And I still like to go into bookshops. And I put a shout out to the former leader of Kirklees Council, David Sheard, that literally owns a bookshop, not in Hetton-White Bookshop. Quirky name, but also I'd like to thank the librarians, because it shows you how much they're trusted, and it did on the survey. So thank you, Richard, and thank you, Paul. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Richard, and to the team for that presentation. That was great. I hope you continue your career into podcasts or something similar. But it just shows, doesn't it, how vibrant our libraries are and how much they're valued by the residents and the volunteer groups that help to add capacity to that service. The amount of work put in by officers in this area also needs to be praised. To come out of COVID and start knitting the service back together again was an opportunity for sure, but a hard slog, very hard slog, so thanks to them too. But what a good job we fought to keep them open. When I saw the key discussion, I dug out an article from 2014, when the option on the table was to keep Dewsbury and Huddersfield libraries open, while the 24 other included Cleckheaton and Bristol and Hetton-White faced closure. In Cleckheaton, as Councillor Pinnock has already said, we collected nearly 4,000 signatures just to show Council just how passionate people were about their libraries, and they did in spades. That said, it's clear to see that the libraries in Kirklees have made good progress from those dark days. The decision to change direction and make libraries vibrant, safe spaces, and a bridge between council and communities was a good one, like we said it would be. To talk to the slides briefly, to the presentation briefly, I really recognise the slide about the variety of activities run in or from local libraries. The offer during the school holidays, when activities increased, was a real help to parents, and I really relate to what you were saying about being a young parent. And I know after using Cleckheaton Library when mine was small, that the reading programmes, the activities, and sometimes just the change of venue on a rainy Yorkshire summer's day were a godsend. And on the online searches, it's great that we've got places where people can come to do searches online and engage with council services. Those numbers look very impressive, and that's a must-have for any modern council, it really is. But we must still recognise that there are a lot of people who sometimes need or sometimes prefer a face-to-face or telephone interaction when dealing with council services. That's why we still call for some of our other buildings, like our town hall in Cleckheaton, to have that element of public facing municipality where people can go and get simple answers to simple questions where they expect them to be. I like the bit about the integrated community asset, but of course, when they're done right and have the proper community ownership, we can go on then to talk about them being the heart of communities. I'm a big believer in the assets like libraries, town halls, and leisure centres being community engines or dynamos, where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. As we approach our new round of financial challenges, we do well to reflect on what could have been lost in the fire. And if the administration hadn't listened to what the rest of the council and public was saying, and think about what some of those communities will need to grow and be safe after this current dust has settled. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Councillor Marchington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Richard, for your presentation. I've given my little experience of Goka Library in the past, so I won't say. It's interesting what people have said about libraries and being a library nerd. And I wouldn't describe myself as a library nerd. I'm definitely a book nerd. And that was developed over years, particularly my access to the library at Combe Valley High School and the exceptionally frightening librarian Miss Pearson, who, when I started reading the stuff I read now regularly, which is modern literary fiction, said to me, do your parents censor what you read, Andrew? And that's before I ploughed into Georgia. I'd read 1984 before 1934, and it was down and out in London and Paris. And it was only when I read it I understand what she meant, and my parents hadn't got a clue what I was reading. And thank goodness for that. And I'm also really pleased about that we did fight to keep libraries open. A massive thank you to the volunteers in Goka who do that and continue to struggle with that. But it's really important we kept our librarian, Sue Cook, who's the focus, that, and Sonia, who's based in Goka Library, and that gives people who love libraries and love books and all that the confidence to keep doing what they're doing. We really didn't want to run the library on our own in Goka, but we were quite willing to come along and help, and they've worked hard. And I think that's an ongoing process. But I think we'll need to look for and the investments the Liberal Democrats made in libraries in the early 2000s. I mean, I get fed up with seeing John Smithson's name on the plate and stuff. But we did invest in libraries when others, and that stood us in good stead. But we need to continue moving. And some stuff I've heard about tonight about why we use a library. It's not just for pleasure. It's not just but the stuff that we could do in Kirklees. To have the libraries, the technical and commercial. Have we got access to information, library and information centres? So Kirklees is still a centre of excellence for textiles. We too often think it's a historical thing. We have woven all that and got the looms that go. It isn't. So what access do people have to the information in our area about up to date, all the fantastic stuff they're doing at the university about this, the person in the white suit material, the stuff that, the fibres that repel dirt and all that. The information, and we should be able to do that. Engineering. So there's an opportunity as we develop, it probably might be a bit late, we're developing our town centres where people can go in and learn about stuff, and some of that might be on digital, or some of it might be on, still, just bits of paper, books and stuff. I have to access a lot of I either access it through audio or through large print material. So books out there. So we could do that, and it's thinking about the future. Information, that brilliant bit about trusting librarians. So and I know our staff at library information centres, they're not all librarians, but people who can point you in the right direction, a trusted source who can point you in the right direction for the information you need. So I would like to see ongoing. I'm fantastic we've kept them, all the safe spaces, but you need to move forward. So access to audiobooks. For me, for children, young people, I've still got my first, tape I bought at Woods in Huddersfield, and most of my fiction stuff I access through audio these days. So we could do that. And Lib is really good, but sometimes you can't get the stuff that you want. If you want a particular book or a text, it's sometimes difficult. And there's people like myself who, if I can't get it at the library, will search for it and buy it, and actually would be quite happy to, once I've got that book, to gift it to the library so that somebody else has got access to it. And that's where, and we can't do that at the moment. It would help to shift some of the books I've got in my house. And it's not just, it's not just I don't want to. So thinking about that, and it's about information and curating that. And whether you're young or old, it might be you're an older person who gets a lot of safe space, you get a lot of pleasure, and it helps you about reading fiction, going through all the MC Beaton books. But you might be a young person who gets most of your information digitally, but you could go to a library information centre and get something that's a bit different, or access your manga, or whatever you want to do, and to do more than that. So I think as we're going forward, information is the key. It is a great pleasure to me. I think my eldest son, he was 18 months old, and he went, it was actually Longwood Mechanics with their library, and he picked up a book off the little portable bookshelf and thumbed through it, so as a child who couldn't read it, and I thought that's just that present. But it's that taking that forward into what information is in the future, and that's what we need to do with our libraries. But a big thank you to everybody who does work so hard at what we got. And
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Butt.
Thank you. Is that on? Is that on? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, members will be pleased to know that I will not be taking long. We all know what a library is. It's a place that helps ensure an authentic record of knowledge created and accumulated by past generations. And in a world without libraries, it would be difficult to advance research in human knowledge or preserve the world's accumulative knowledge and heritage of future generations. Now, we've heard lots of reasons of why people use libraries, and as someone who used our local library in Hetmondwike throughout student times, starting with the fantastic Roald Dahl books, and then recently graduating up to AS level physics to learn about the role of radiation in the treatment of cancer. I appreciate their existence, and in recent times, libraries are now being used by isolated and lonely people to be able to immerse themselves into a good book and forget their issues for a while. And we've also heard that they're a way of building relationships as well. And given the current cost of living crisis, libraries are increasingly being used as warm zones. I hope we can see investments into library services so that we can continue to provide a place of learning, coming together in a place of warmth. P.S. Councillor Paul Davis, can we please start with the refurbishment of Hetmondwike Library? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Councillor Munro. Thank you, Councillor Bolt.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. As referred, first of all, I'd just like to say we're really lucky to have our library in Almonbury. After the original library at the Carnegie Building was closed, and the future of a library in Almonbury was in jeopardy. But as you said earlier, libraries have evolved. They are much more. They are much more than. I'll start again. They are about much more than books. They should be at the heart of our communities. But I'm not so sure, unfortunately, that the library in Almonbury is. I understand charges are made for the hire of the community room in the library building for user groups who charge their members. This may be for craft lessons or language lessons. And this has resulted in local community groups seeking alternative...
Councillor McGuinn, can we have one conversation, please? Thank you.
Yes. This has resulted in local community groups seeking alternative locations for their activities. And I'm aware that there are only 3 weekly user groups, which are the Knit and Natter, the Men's Room and Story Time. So I feel that the question of charges for charging groups needs to be looked at and to see what can be done, because if we want to support our local people, then we need a library that will provide the hire of a room that's not too excessive so that user groups will be able to use it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Councillor Smage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just start by saying thank you to all the library staff and the volunteers who have kept our libraries at the centre of our communities. And that, I think, is extremely essential. Because, yes, you're right, the footfall in a centre is helped tremendously by a library being open. Not only for local businesses, but also for people who use that library. The safe places that the library are involved in doesn't seem to be as prominent as it used to be. And I think it's really important that the libraries are seen as those safe places where anybody can go. And if you need help of any description, you can go in and talk to people. I also think that libraries are an essential part of the health and wellbeing strategy of this council, along with sports centres. Libraries also help with people's well-being and health. Yes, I used to borrow LPs from the library as well as books. And for those, do I admit that? I mean, you know, do I? do I show my age by doing that? But I think it's really important that there is a good book stock, so people who are using the libraries on a regular basis have a good turnover of books in those libraries. And the e-books also, yes, I like a book as well, but the e-books are also very much at the forefront, so people don't have to go out and buy. If they can't afford, then they can get the e-books. I noticed your slide mentioned Bristol. Thank you very much. We have lots of groups that use our library, including the Knit and Natter group, and they're doing an excellent job knitting blankets and gloves and hats and hot water bottle covers and doorstops and things like this. They're doing an excellent job doing that. There's one I did wonder though, well, there's two things actually. You have a dementia strategy in place for the libraries, and that is really good. I think that's really good. But the procurement across the council does not necessarily follow the library's lead in being dementia friendly. And I do think that the procurement across the board should actually be thought about in relation to dementia friendly. We've had an incident just recently concerning homes and neighbourhoods where procurement was not dementia friendly, and more money is having to be spent as a result of the first procurement not being correct. So I think that the lead that the libraries are taking in that regard should actually be rolled across the council as a whole. Can I also ask, when I was studying a particular course in a particular degree I was doing, you have to go across a number of libraries. Because it's historical if you're using reference material. So I was studying some mills in Batley and some mills in Halifax. And so I had to have a Bradford library card, a Kirklees library card, a Leeds library card, a Calderdale library card. And then I had to have an archives reader's ticket, all to do one course and to get the reference material. Wouldn't the councils across West Yorkshire be helped if you had a library ticket from your area and you were doing some studying, that in actual fact you could have access to reference material in other libraries across West Yorkshire without having to get their library tickets as well? Have a system whereby that could be done. Because students who are studying have to go across several libraries. You know, there were things about Halifax in Leeds Library. There were things about Batley in Bradford libraries, for instance. You know, it's historical as to where the books are. And I know there's a book exchange. You know, you can ask for a book from another library to be sent to the library of your choice. But why did I have to have all these? Do you know what I mean? I think that could improve the service for people who are studying. And can I give a shout to the archive as well? Because libraries also, some of the libraries also gave access to our archives. And the archive service is really, really important. Not only for, I mean, I found it useful in a councillor role, trying to find minutes from councils in previous days, but also when I was studying as well. And I think that access to the archives should be as easy as possible for people in that respect. Okay, and I think I have covered all my points. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Paula Davis.
Hello, thank you. I want to add my thanks to the chance for the reminiscing about my early library opportunities, my little cardboard card and going down. And when my parents were at work all day and I was stuck behind a counter in a library, in a post office, which is where I grew up, I'd go out in the morning, borrow my library books.
Councillor Sain, can we have one conversation, please?
I would be taking the same books back the next day because I'd read them all, and that's where I went. And it was 67 years old. It was the one place I could go on my own, be safe and do stuff. So I've always loved libraries. When I first came to Huddersfield as a student, not only joined, obviously Huddersfield, the University Library, but the Central Library as well. I was borrowing LPs, cassettes, books, all that sort of stuff. And it's lovely that how they've grown, and it's now e-books and it's the internet and it's all the information as well. And it's all great stuff that everybody should have access to. My pleas for more hours. So I did a bit of prodding this morning. I've done a little bit of search through the hours. 24 libraries in Huddersfield. A quarter of them are open for less than 15 hours a week, 15 hours a week, which isn't enough. And half of them are only open for 20 hours or less a week. Out of, 6 libraries, 6 days a week, 24 libraries, there's 144 sessions a week, right? Only 27 of those are more than 7 hours a day. So we don't get that opportunity, and I know it's money, I know it's all of that, but we don't get that opportunity for spending a day browsing, reading, going down those rabbit holes and looking through books and learning stuff. The internet's great for answering questions and being a distraction, but browsing through books and following threads, you need books and paper to do that. I am that old-fashioned. Cleckheaton is open 26 hours a week from my details. That's what I found as well. But that's my plea, especially as we're getting more and more people are accessing local groups, information about services that are available to them. They haven't got full-time access to that. We're creating a disparity amongst our residents as well. And that's the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Reynolds.
In my past as a child, I was one of those children that always had her nose in a book, much to my mum's utter disgust. I think Frank Zappa summed it up for me when he said so many books, so little time. It wasn't the only thing he said about libraries and books, though. Some of those things he said weren't probably suitable for this chamber, but look them up. My library, my local library, was my little place of paradise. I was always one of those, however, that had a fine. I never wanted to let my books go. However, it was as a young mum that I think I learnt the contribution of my local library to the community. My double buggy was always welcomed in that space, however difficult it was to get in and out. And it was a much needed social space for both my children and me at that time. I was really lucky that my local library was a relatively new build, and it was accessible for all, not stuffy or old-fashioned. Like Councillor Marchington said, I'm very proud of our local library in Goka and the amazing contributions that our staff there, whether they're volunteers or staff, make. And it was no surprise to me to see how well librarians are trusted and valued. Almost part of the family. And that is where I think their biggest asset is. Being part of our community families. Keeping and making connections and links that over time have been lost in this modern, fast world. And as we have learnt in the last few years, and we continue to learn, how much we need those connections, it just shows how our libraries are very, very much part of our futures. Oh, and I love the no fines policy.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillor Greaves.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard, for your presentation, and I'd like to express my thanks not just to all the staff in the library service, but to all those 400 volunteers, without whom most of our village libraries would have closed. We've come a long way since I started as a councillor.
Back then, it was the campaign to keep the village libraries open, and in the main, that was successful. One of the great things about that was that those campaigners, in the most part, converted from being campaigners to being the very volunteers who now support those libraries. And I think that positivity that they put into the fight, it still shines through now, and we're like a decade later. I've always as a kid, I devoured books. I've always found myself getting lost in the university library, wandering with my official reading list, and very quickly get distracted with far more interesting books. I think both of my kids also have got into the routine of reading, and I find that great. We buy books for them, but we're also very much regulars at Honley Library. And Honley Library is close to my heart. It was opened in the 30s. My great uncle was instrumental in along with at the time he was the town clerk for Honley. So he was instrumental in getting the funding to open it from Carnegie and from West Yorkshire. And so when it was faced with closure, it was something that I wasn't keen to see happen. We've just completed the asset transfer on Honley Library. The volunteers, so the parish council has taken it, but it's very much run by the volunteers, and they've got a lot of ideas about how to develop it for the future. So 10 years ago, there was a big question mark about the purpose and the relevance of the libraries, and I think the big bit for me was always about moving it from being a traditional library service and getting more out there about it being a community space, about it being an information centre, about it being a meeting place. So nowadays we have lots more activities out of our libraries. They host regular groups. There's a safe, warm space. But I think also in the digital world that we're in, that IT offer for many communities is really, really important. So it's the ability to access the internet and that range of information. But I'd just like to finish on where we go to the future. So I want to see our libraries continue to evolve, and there's two big challenges. One that many other councillors have commented upon is the opening hours, and sometimes the limited opening hours actually I think is what in some respects limits the success of the libraries. If they were open more, I think they would certainly see much more use. But the bigger concern for me is our volunteers are so instrumental in the functioning of the library service that it's important that we recognise that. And we need to do that in terms of the recruitment and retention and support of volunteers. Because simply put, without all that volunteer effort, my local library, Paul's local library, wouldn't be open. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Graves. Councillor David Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this guy walks up to the counter and says, "Fish and chips twice, please, love." And the lady behind the counter replies, "Sir, this is a library." And so he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, fish and chips twice, please, love." It's worth a clap. It's worth a clap. I just wanted to associate myself with a lot of the comments that have been made already. I think there's been lots of good things coming out of this discussion tonight. I wanted just to be a little bit of a devil's advocate, because if we take everything that's been said tonight and we use that to formulate policy, we'd have a library in every town, in every village, they'd be fully staffed and volunteers, and they'd be all open 60 hours a week. It's not quite what we're going to end up with. I'm sure everybody will agree. So I think there's certain questions that we all need to go through, which I'm hoping will be helpful. They're certainly not in any way derogatory to the library service. The first is, what do we see as our priorities? Because there's lots of things. It was one of Richard's slides up there about you walk in expecting to get a book, and actually I got all this lot. So we've got the loan of books, we've got provision of information, we've got provision of other council services, a meeting place, a place of safety, just somewhere quiet where you can go and study, a room for hire. Is it all of these things? Are some of these things best provided in a library, or could they be provided somewhere else? That's just one to think about. What do we call such a place? Is there any barrier to people going into somewhere called a library because they expect it to be one thing, whereas actually it's going to be another thing? Just questions to throw out. Do we have the arguments that we make coloured by this question of, we've got a lovely old building in this village, what should we do with it? Yeah? Because there is a little bit of that comes in as well. You know, where do we best provide some of the services once we've decided what we want to provide? And I think most importantly is the gritty issue of how do we square some of this with quite a tight funding envelope and possibly rising public expectation. So those are the things we have to look at. So, as I say, I wouldn't say anything against the libraries. I'd like to agree with what's been said. In fact, sat here with one either side, I'd be foolish to say anything against libraries. But I do think there are big questions that come out of some of the things we said tonight that we all need to consider. And I think it's fair to acknowledge that there are wider and associated issues when we think about libraries that have a knock-on effect on the rest of the council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor David Hogg. Councillor Adam Gregg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to associate other members' comments, I'd like to thank Richard for an excellent presentation, which was really enjoyable, brought back a lot of memories of mine. Like so many of us, we've got memories of Kirklees libraries, and mine are similar to Councillor Smager's, although I was often taking CDs out of the library in Huddersfield, which I'm not going to tell you what CDs I was taking out because it would be very embarrassing, but Take That might have been one of them. Rick Astley, anything by Stock Aitken and Waterman was one of the high on the list at the time. But just going back to the range of services that were offered back in the day, I didn't have internet at home when it was just coming out, and going to the library was an opportunity to get online and do homework and use a range of services, which is still available today. There's so many great services that the library offer, and recently I went to the library that's been relocated now at Civic Centre 3 to promote the relocation, and I'm going to continue promoting the fantastic services that people really enjoy locally, such as the press reader. I just wanted to mention that because a lot of people in Kirklees can actually use the press reader at home, which is a service that's offered. Get all the newspapers on your iPad or on your computer, and it's absolutely free, and it's provided by Kirklees libraries. So I know how important these libraries are. Obviously, I'm going to continue promoting the fantastic services they do, and long live Kirklees libraries.
Thank you, Councillor Adam Gregg. We are now taking a break for 10 minutes, and we will resume after that, because I definitely need a break, so thank you. Okay, we're back on item 8, page 11, West Yorkshire Combined Authority minutes. To receive for information the minutes of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. The minutes are here for noting. Are there any comments or questions regarding the minutes? Councillor David Hall.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Referring firstly to page 16, I have a couple of questions actually, and they'll probably be answered by different people. But the first is about the West Yorkshire Mayor's Cost of Living Emergency Fund. It's referred to in the minutes of October the 21st, and again in the more recent set of minutes. Is Kirklees intended to bid for some of this money, or is it to be accessed on a lower level by communities? And will we be getting some information to councillors about how we can tap into that, please? Because we are kind of 4 months into it. And the other question is on a completely different topic, which is that I note in the Cabinet's budget papers, which they approved yesterday, there isn't any money in there, or I think I'm right in saying, someone will correct me if I've overlooked it, for either the A653 corridor improvements or the North Kirklees orbital route. And I was wondering if someone could confirm whether those two schemes have been scrapped. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Ponder.
£3 million has been allocated across West Yorkshire for all 5 local authorities, and that will be part of our own cost of living programme. And Paul I'll ask Paul to provide you with the details because he's got more sort of working knowledge at a local level. And regarding the A653 and the highways, my learned friend, Councillor Eric First, isn't here, but I know that he's been working on that at the moment, but I'm sure when he gets back shortly, he'll be able to provide more details. So Paul, do you want to just tell us about the £3 million cost of living fund from the Mayoral Combined Authority and our share of that, please?
Councillor Davis.
I'll get some exact numbers for you, but in terms of the approach, yeah, we're certainly having a share of that. We've been using that alongside Household Support Fund money as well to allocate support to community groups. That's been in partnership with one community. There's already been one tranche of that. The second tranche of that has also just completed, so the grant applications through one community. There will be further funding coming through. I think from memory, I think there's another 2 tranches, but don't hold me on that one. I'll double check for you. But yeah, we absolutely are having that share, and it is making a big difference out there on the ground in terms of the grants that one community will be able to give, and I'll provide you with some full detail. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Okay. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just turning to page 20 of the bundle, I'm looking at the Employment Support West Yorkshire scheme. And there's just a couple of points that I would appreciate some help on this, if possible, if anybody's able to help me with this. The first is that I note that there's a total of there's £12 million allocated, but the individual allocations to Bradford, Calderdale, Kirklees, Leeds and Wakefield come to just over 11.5 million. So do we have any information as to what the other £500,000 is going to be used for? And secondly, in relation to the 2.3 million that's allocated to Kirklees, do we have any information yet on how that will be deployed in Kirklees, and in particular where it's likely to be deployed? So will it be within all the wards throughout Kirklees, or is it just within certain areas? Thank you.
Councillor Ponder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Regarding the £500,000, I don't know where that's going to be allocated. But in terms of those are £2.3 million. Graham, are you in a position to answer that, please?
Councillor Turner.
Mr Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Watson. The remaining money will be delegated later on as we roll these projects out. We'll send one for future approvals are made in accordance with the assurance pathway and approval route outline in the report and where they're required. So that will come later on, these initial tranche of that money. We're still working on schemes that will support our back to work schemes and some of our programmes around the government's programme on improving maths abilities and numeracy. So it will support some of those programmes, and it will also top up some of the programmes that come to an end when the European Structural Fund starts to run out. It will enable us to run those programmes longer. So that's where our money is going. But with the details of all of that has to be worked out. But we will be able to pick up when that European Structural Funding runs out. We can continue that programme into the future.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor Bolt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Looking at the report on page 25 about transport programmes, and it talks about paused schemes. Could the leader give us some indication as the A62 scheme comes towards its conclusion? I think it was supposed to be March, but that's now been delayed. That will finish at Altfield House Lane. So we've got a wonderful Capper Econ and construction from Huddersfield Town Centre down to Altfield House Lane. From Whittaker Street, coming back towards Huddersfield to the public house that's there in the former Volvo garage, that's had a Capper Econ. In the middle of that, Mr. Mayor, there's some, I don't know whose ward that is, there's some 600 metres of road surface. Ironically, with the project sign saying, we apologise for any delays, but that's due to highway works. But that 600 metres is not in the current schemes that we're seeing. So they're apologising for highway works on 600 metres of road, which isn't taking place. Now, it seems to be not only false accounting that you've got two schemes, you're not joining them up, so you always have that situation where one part of the road will be worn out, but on an economy of scale, when you've had the massive A62 road works, to have finished off and done a Capper Econ for 600 metres and linked them up would have seemed to be prudent management. Is that one of the schemes that's paused, or is that one that the leader forgot?
Councillor Pondo.
Let me assure you, Councillor Bolt, the leader does not forget. Anyway, and the schemes are joined up. They might not seem joined up, but believe me, they are joined up. But the A62, Councillor Firth, if you can shed further light on that, I'd be grateful.
Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. Martin. I have been assured that A652 will be finished on the 16th of next month. Did I say 652? It's 62. And on the 16th of March, except for a small section where there will be some temporary traffic lights. And apart from that, normal service, I hope, because there's always a slip between couple of is there not? Because who knows, we're in February, going into March. We've been very lucky with the weather so far. We could well have snow yet, and which will delay things. But all being well, 16th of March is the date that I've been given, and I'm passing on to you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Minutes on page 14 of the papers. At the meeting that Councillor Pandor attended in October, references that members request that bus operators invited to a meeting to hear their concerns firsthand about unreliable services. Can Councillor Pandor please outline to us what discussions he has had in relation to trying to ensure that we have a better bus service, especially in North Kirklees? Thank you.
Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a topic that all leaders care passionately about. And at the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, we do have very robust debates. And one thing I can say, Mr. Mayor, is all the leaders, including opposition parties, actually share the same issues and same concerns. And Tracy, as the Mayor, she has had the discussions. We keep on feeding into on a regular basis. And you've probably also seen that she's actually highlighted these issues across national media and local media. And I can assure you that Tracy is doing all she can to actually make sure that, you know, the bus operators and the service continues. You'll be also pleased to know that the bus support grant that was due to end on the 31st of March through very close partnership working and liaison and lobbying with government, they have extended it. But having said that, that's not the solution, because we need a longer-term settlement. And numerous occasions, members in this chamber, quite rightly, have raised the issues around bus services because it impacts everybody. And that is something that Tracy is pushing. and we need to actually look at a longer term solution in terms of how we develop a model that actually delivers for everybody, regardless of where you live, and at the same time we need a funding solution that actually delivers. But the governance is a massive issue, very, very complex. Do we franchise, do we bring it in-house, do we do this, do we do that? But that's going to be continuing. But I'm pleased that government is talking to us, and we will continue to do our best to make sure that we get them services that we deserve, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Panda. Councillor David Hall. Councillor Smedge.
So the minutes say that members of the obviously members, so in the plural, requested a meeting to hear concerns firsthand. This is why I asked what you had put forward for Kirklees. So are you saying that members of the combined authority didn't have that meeting with operators? It is the mayor that is doing it. So how is Kirklees' voice in needing better buses service actually being put forward? Councillor Firth, no doubt you're going to answer my question very eloquently. Thank you.
Councillor Firth.
Thank you.
Only last Friday, you may not or may not be aware that the government decided to fund the bus companies for another 3 months. What a way to run a bus, you know. But you did touch on, because we've talked about this, the Transport Committee, on the chair, Susan Hinchcliffe, leader of Bradford, and only contacted me today about these issues. I've had an email from Arriva, so they will not be making any further cuts. I can give you that email if you wish. That is not the case with First. First is still reviewing the situation, but it's not looking good. I've got a whole raft of proposed cuts and from First, which I'll gladly share. But your point was an Arriva in North Kirklees, and though they've made some cuts, they do not intend cutting any more for the foreseeable future. Let's have that caveat.
Councillor Hall.
Right, thank you. I just wondered whether I could just re-put that initial question to Councillor Firth. I noted that in the Cabinet's budget proposals, which were decided yesterday, I didn't see any money in there for either the A653 walking and cycling corridor improvements or the North Kirklees orbital route. It seems to have disappeared, and I was wondering whether that's because those schemes have been pulled.
Councillor Firth.
Have you heard of Active Travel England? Yes, who are now based in York. Together with our officers, we have actually made a bid for Active Travel England, and that will be put forward with a whole group of bids from all of West Yorkshire. There is money available, and hopefully those schemes will be proceeded with in the not too distant future. They haven't.
Councillor Hall.
But what about the North Kirklees orbital route? Because that's a massive road scheme, isn't it? A new road scheme. So presumably Active Travel England wouldn't be funding that.
The orbital scheme, I've very little knowledge about. I've inherited this from Peter, but I will come back to you, and I'll come back to all councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Councillor Martin Bolt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Picking up on the comments made by Councillor Smedge. It is within the setup of the Transport Committee and the District Spokesman that there's supposed to be 2 district liaison meetings per year. We're now some 9 months into the municipal year and we haven't had a meeting, and I think it's like the proverbial bus service that you wait for 9 months and we're going to get 2 coming along together, Eric. Now, whether you want to answer or delegate, it's to shed some light, because nobody responded to Councillor Smedge's question about consultation. Could you clarify that there are going to be 2 district liaison meetings before we start on the pre-election period? And could you commit to make sure that as many people as possible are informed of that. We'll use the full weight of Kirklees' PR machine because, as has been alluded to, there's concerns from people attending schools, colleges, work and trying to get out for pleasure. So rather than just being met in a darkened room as they used to with about 15 people, can we ensure that the Kirklees meetings will be publicised as wide as possible so that all users get the opportunity to attend?
Councillor Eric, sorry. Confuse me then.
I can confirm that 2 meetings are planned, one before the election period, and I think the second one is in November. And I assure you it'll be well publicised. 2 this year. There's no time to do it before the election period. Clicks in. 2, it won't resolve anything. So to publicise it without Kirklees, I think the dates have been mentioned. Councillor Afak will come back if I'm wrong, but there is one before the election period and then one later in the year.
Thank you, Councillor.
So I think the goalposts have shifted because last week we were told that one was going to be in an afternoon in Huddersfield and one was going to be in an evening in Dewsbury. Well, I was seeking clarity because you were at the same meeting.
Can I get Eric? Can I get Councillor Butt to come in, if that's okay with you, please? Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So just to confirm, Councillor Butt, there will be 2 meetings and we envisage that they will be before the election in May. So one is going to be in Huddersfield in the afternoon and then the other one is going to be at the beginning of April. So just before Purdah, we'll have another one which will be in Dewsbury. I hope that clarifies.
Okay, thank you.
That we had the opportunity to clarify and that Eric's now better informed that when these meetings...
Thank you, Councillor Bolt.
Thanks for that.
Can you now sit down, please, Councillor Bolt, please? Thank you. Can you now sit down, please? Thank you for that. Oh, you've had a supplementary. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Item 9, page 33, calculation of council tax base, reference from Cabinet. Before I bring Councillor Davis in, can I bring Julie in, please?
Do you remember your name?
I did remember her name.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you. This is just a very brief reminder. So I'm sure all of you will have spotted this, but at paragraph 1.1 of the report, it makes it clear that this is covered by section 106 of the Local Government and Finance Act 1992. This therefore means that if you are in arrears with council tax of 2 months and more, although you can speak on this item, you can't vote on it. And if you are, you need to declare it to the meeting. So if anybody wants to declare that, please can you declare it now before we start the debate on this matter?
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Paul Davies.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will do my best to keep this fairly brief. This is a technical report. It is a reference from Cabinet, as you say. It was the Cabinet on the 17th of January. The purpose of the report is to seek approval for the various tax bases which will apply to Kirklees area for the financial year 2023-24 in connection with council tax. It's been the practice in Kirklees to take this report both to Cabinet and to Council. But given the very technical nature of this report and the fact that the calculation anyway forms part of the annual budget papers, this report also requests the delegation of future annual CTB calculations from 2024-25 onwards to the Council's Section 151 officer in consultation with the Cabinet member for corporate services. So I'll take you to Section 6, Officer's recommendations. Again, to meet the requirements of Section 67, brackets 2, of the Local Government Finance Act 1992, which requires that the tax base for council tax should be approved by the authority, it is recommended that Council note the support and appendices to this report and approve 2023-24 council tax base for the whole of the Kirklees area at £123,215.79. And the council, no, that's wrong. No, that would be millions, so I've got that one wrong, haven't I? My apologies. I'm thinking much lower down. So it'll be 123 million. I was wondering where the 79 pence came from. I thought Eamon was getting very, very accurate. It does apply to the parish councils, though. And the council tax bases for the 5 parish and town council areas are set out in this report and the accompanying appendices. Also, it's recommended the council approve the proposal to delegate future annual CTB calculations from 24-25 onwards, as I said earlier, to the council's section 151 officer in consultation with the corporate portfolio holder. This is due to the very technical nature of this report and the fact, as I said already, that the calculation anyway forms part of the annual budget papers for member consideration at Budget Council. As you can see in section 3, my recommendations are in line with the officer's recommendations, and just to prove I'm not completely losing it, as you'll see across the parish councils and town councils, we do get down to pence as well in terms of their tax base. So I propose officer's recommendations, supported not just by myself but by the previous cabinet as well, to the council today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Is that seconded?
Second, Mr Mayor, and reserve the right.
Is there any comments on this matter? No comments. Right to reply, Councillor Davies? No? Okay. Okay. So you'll just check with him as well. Can we now go for show of hands for vote? Those in favour? Yeah. Well, it looks like carried. Yeah, that's carried. Yeah, that's carried anyway. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Sokol. Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that the proposed dates of Council for 2023-2024 be approved and the attendance of the elected Mayor of West Yorkshire be confirmed for 15th of November 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Is that second?
Seconded, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any comments on this matter? No. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor. Liberal Democrat Group are uncomfortable with the suggestion in front of us that we repeat this year's what I understood to be an emergency move to swap the February and March budget and council arrangement. We're uncomfortable because it would leave a third of the year without a council where we can ask questions of the administration and hold them to account. We're uncomfortable. I think the administration should be uncomfortable too with that. We would much prefer to return back to the arrangement as it is now, fully understanding that we would have a conversation in future that would say, if we are once again put in a position where we are producing a budget late because of a late announcement from government, then that's what we would do. We would swap that again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Okay. Right. Councillor Pan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I hear what you're saying, Councillor Lawson, but the way this year's budget was rolled out and the way the government announcements came, the autumn statement is no longer in autumn. It's probably more like spring. And the fact that this is a one-year budget, officers have advised quite rightly that they need time to prepare, plan, because next year's budget is probably going to be even more difficult. I hope that things start getting better in terms of energy prices, inflation and all the rest of it. But I think what I would recommend, Mr Mayor, is that we approve these dates, and what we can do is we can have a conversation at leading members, and I'm open for that conversation to actually switch the dates around. But I think for the purpose of this meeting, Mr Mayor, I would very strongly recommend that this council approve the dates as they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pando. Went off.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Obviously, this came through Corporate Governance and Audit, and I sit on Corporate Governance and Audit, and I failed to support these dates at Corporate Governance and Audit for two reasons. I'm pleased to see that one of those reasons had been addressed, because when this came to Corporate Governance and Audit, it was unclear when the West Yorkshire Mayor was going to come, and there was a concern that we were going to lose one of our holding executive to account meetings by accommodating the Mayor. So at least that has been addressed, and I'd like to thank the administration for picking that up and dealing with it. However, I do agree with my colleagues across the way that the way the council meetings have been set out, it does leave far too large a gap in terms of the ability for this council to come together and hold the executive to account. You leave yourself in a position where from February you have no opportunity until you get to July, and that can't be right. Now, I hear the leaders saying, well, we can have a discussion later and let's kick the can down the road. I'd prefer to deal with it in a different way. I would say vote down the paper today. We can have those discussions. We can approve the dates of the council meetings at the budget meeting. There's nothing to stop us from doing that constitutionally. And that would enable everybody to get what they want. And I think points that are being raised, and they were raised by Councillor Pinnock in the Corporate Governance and Audit, are very, very valid. That we need to be seen to be operating in a way in which there is an opportunity for people, and I include backbench members of the ruling party as well as opposition members, to be able to have an opportunity to ask those questions at full council in the visibility that full council has. And currently we don't have that. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Martington before you, Councillor Pando.
Who's responding? Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think all of us appreciate that it's been a particularly difficult budget this year, and that statements have arrived late, so we've given that. And it's a one-year budget, but also it does concern me that we've gone from, over a period of time, we had difficult budgets for a long time now, and we've gone from a procedure where significant numbers of us, cross-party, used to meet in the town hall pre-Christmas. We used to be provided with budget booklets, using skills and wisdom across the group and the council to really forensically detail the budget, and we need to have more time, to a situation where we are getting information later and later. So I think, appreciate it's been different this year, but what there's a danger is doing is going from difficult circumstances that are going to push us into a new pattern behaviour, which doesn't enable the majority of councillors, including members of the backbench members of the administration, to see the budget details. So I think one of the things we can do, the dates for setting this are in the gift of council. I think we should go back to the February setting budget and take on board what you're saying about the difficulty should be. But actually, one of the things that we picked up from the Democracy Commission, looking at other authorities, actually a number of other authorities engaged the whole of the council in much more detail in budget issues before it came to the final budget setting. So if that is an issue, there needs to be a commitment on behalf of the administration to actually engage all of us more in budget setting much earlier, and particularly in the autumn, before Christmas, about some of the, notwithstanding the detail is not going to emerge until we get the final figures from government, and but some of the strategic stuff, from the detailed stuff, we talked about libraries this evening, all of us could be involved in that, but with the understanding, as Councillor Hall said, that circumstances and what we want is not going to fit the resource envelope available. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin and Councillor Pando. Thank you, Councillor Hall. Right to reply, Councillor Hussain.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it's been covered.
Thank you. We'll now go to a vote. Roll for call in terms of those for. Yes. Those against?
Carried.
That, just going to get to that bit, yeah. Carried, so that's been carried. Numbers. Some of the numbers.
We have 29,
29,
23.
23. Yeah, I've got okay. Item 11, written questions to the leader, cabinet members, chairs of committee and nominated persons. A written schedule of submitted questions has been circulated. I will now invite members to ask their questions in turn. The appropriate member will respond. One supplementary question to each submitted question is permitted. This is the first one. Where's the questions?
Question to the leader. How important does the leader see reviewing complaints?
Councillor Pondo.
Complaints very, very important and take that very seriously. It's part of our feedback loop in terms of how we learn and improve on our services. And Mr Mayor, constructive criticism is always good when it's constructive, and it makes sure that we actually keep on improving on it on a yearly basis and on a periodic basis. And the other thing, Mr Mayor, it identifies issues early. So if there's anything that's coming out that's got a common theme, that then actually feeds into the whole of the planning process. So, John, it is very important, and I do take it very, very seriously. I'm sure you've got a supplementary.
Councillor Taylor, have you got supplementary?
Just to thank him for that comment, the subsequent questions probably are really complaints, and that was my point for asking first, because we do need that feedback loop, and this is an important way of getting that feedback loop through to officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Question 2, Councillor Taylor to Cabinet Member for Environment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Does the administration think that ensuring people can access medical facilities during winter is a priority?
Councillor Mather.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Of course, yes. Kirklees, as with other local highways authorities, have an approved winter policy and operational plan. The document provide information on the level of service and ensures that we meet our duty under the Highways Act 1980. Kirklees makes available a budget annually specifically for winter services, which allows Kirklees to deploy a level of service that is affordable. And the service compares well with surrounding West Yorkshire authorities. We currently treat 53% of our network, and in doing so, maintain access along key routes
for the majority of road users, including access to key services. It is, however, accepted that we are unable to provide a winter service along every part of the network and during periods of snow and ice. Those who are not on the gritting route will see a level of disruption. Access to emergency medical centres and key infrastructure is, of course, a key consideration within our policy, but there will be a number of non-emergency medical centres, facilities that will see a level of disruption during the winter period. We are keen to promote self-help within our communities, and I am happy to take away any locations of concern, Councillor Taylor, and ask that the team pick this up and have a discussion around self-help strategies with smaller community medical services. It's always been the case. You know where I am. You can call me, pick this up outside of council rather than wait for it to come here.
Councillor Taylor, do you have a supplementary question?
Yeah, I've raised this here because I've raised it before through scrutiny and don't get an answer. The health centre in my ward does not get gritted to, and there are no other health centres that don't actually get gritted to. And I've asked, why aren't we gritting to the health centre? So people, when they need to get to their doctor's appointments, can't get to the doctor's appointments because the road to the health centre and the footpaths to the health centre aren't gritted. So when you say essential services are gritted to, they're not. So would you like to take it away and find out why we're not gritting to ensure that people can get to Shepley Health Centre? Thank you.
Councillor Mather.
Earlier I said priority routes and larger emergency centres. There are some centres that are left. However, I'm saying we can talk and we can have self-help resolution to this, because it obviously isn't one of the larger centres that's on our priority routes. But we can rectify that. We can rectify that by talking about it and making sure that the surgery asks for help, and we can drop some sandbags or gritting sand.
Thank you, Councillor Mathers. Councillor, question 3. Councillor Taylor. I know.
How many outstanding requests does the council have for repairs to or replacement of road signs?
Councillor Mather.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Obviously, it's a rolling programme. You can't ever say there's a period where we stop counting. So people carry on putting things in, and that's the number that we have. But let me take you through. So Kirklees has an annual budget of £100,000 for illuminated and non-illuminated sign maintenance. Don't look confused. All I'm saying is people are putting in about these signs all year long, and there is no cut-off period, so I couldn't give you the number where, precise number. So the annual inspection regime focuses on mandatory sign replacements. It is accepted that non-mandatory signage does take a lower priority and is replaced when resources allow. The district has over 1,900 kilometres of network, which is inspected at least annually. The inspection, coupled with service requests, provide a programme of work for maintenance. I have asked the team to provide me with the estimated backlog of repairs, if possible. When I have this information, I will provide you with an update. Hang on, Councillor Taylor. Hang on. Again, we would all like to have unlimited resources to allow us to respond to requests which come in, but with the financial challenges we face, we know that is not possible to do, and we have prioritised routes.
Councillor Taylor, do you have a supplementary question?
My first supplementary question is, would she like to answer the first question, please? Because she hasn't answered it. I think she gave me a response to something else. I don't know whether she was given the wrong brief. I asked a very, very simple question, which was about a number. She says she'll get that information to me when she gets it from the service. I put this question in a month ago. So have you sat on it for a month and you haven't asked for that information?
Councillor Mother.
I was receiving the questions till 11 o'clock yesterday. So if you put it in a month ago, I didn't get it. And like I said, there's no emergency, you will get a response.
Councillor Taylor, just supplementary now.
Well, I'm struggling with supplementary. What is the point in putting in written questions if they're sat on for a month and nothing's done with them? Surely somebody should have had access to this question. What is the point of me giving you plenty of notice of questions so you can come back with a decent response if you're saying you got it at 11 o'clock last night?
Councillor Taylor, the Chief Exec will pick that up for you. Thank you.
How does the Cabinet member ensure that our roads are safe? A short answer would be good.
Councillor Mother.
Seeing we've all worked very hard, we're going to get a long answer. So that you're satisfied, Councillor Taylor, I wouldn't want you to think that you've been waiting months for your response. So here goes. Road safety is the responsibility of everyone that uses our road network. The behaviour of road users is indeed one of the greatest challenges we face across West Yorkshire when considering road safety. Safe roads require a strong partnership between Kirklees Council, West Yorkshire Police, West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and more importantly than those who use our roads. Our responsibility in the Safe Roads Partnership is to provide education, training and improvements to infrastructure at locations of greatest concern. Annually, we do implement up to 10 road safety schemes using the fund that is made available from the City Region's Sustainable Transport Settlement. In 2021, the Council spent £1 million on road safety. In 22 and 23, the outturn spend on road safety is likely to be 1.2 million. Highways is working with WICA on the business cases for 900,000 of additional City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement budget for the implementation of some of the recommendations from the recently completed speed limit review. If successful, this funding will enable the service to replace missing and badly worn speed limit signs, review the existing 20-mile-per-hour limits zones across the district, review safety outside all 183 schools in Kirklees, resolve any discrepancies in the legal orders for speed limits to facilitate police enforcement. On 15th of March 2023, we are presenting a 2-year programme which will detail roads that have been prioritised for infrastructure improvements. Kirklees Road Safety Strategy is currently under review and will be presented later this year to Cabinet. The review will include WICA's Vision Zero ambition and give a clear direction of travel for Kirklees Road safety. I'm not going to go on because I think the audience is beginning to go to sleep. It is getting on to 9 o'clock. I shall leave it there.
Councillor Taylor, I'm going to give you a supplementary question.
Yeah, I asked these two questions in order particularly for a purpose. I have examples in my patch, and I'm sure the colleagues must have, where chevron signs that are deemed to be there because they are to tackle road safety have 2 years I've been waiting for chevron signs to be replaced. Actually, one of the two locations, surprisingly, they were replaced this week. But it's taken over 2 years. My reason for asking about backlogs and numbers is because I've also had other examples where I've been told that it had gone into a black hole and they'd lost any record of it. So we need, and I'm challenging you as an administration, you need to have a look at what are you doing in terms of managing. I'm not saying you need to spend more. I'm not saying you should have a big, well, the budget will be the budget, but you need to be managing it much more effectively. And it's not good enough to say to residents, after 2 years, we still haven't replaced some missing signs they've reported because it went into a black hole and we didn't do anything about it. So I think you need to reflect on how you manage, and if you've had these questions for a month, why you haven't really done the homework to make sure you've got suitable answers. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mother, quickly.
You might not like my answers, but they're worked through and they're thorough. We've had, in between the years you're talking about, COVID, haven't we? We've had COVID, so there may be a backlog, but we're getting there. And I told you we're going to have a 2 or 3 year programme, so we will know well ahead.
Councillor Mother's time is up. I'm now going to close the meeting. Thank you ever so much. Have a lovely evening, what's left of it.